Keria.
Huh? It's so interesting when you see a man trying to say something and he's not exactly saying it.
It's interesting when a man does that.
Is.
Moving on swiftly. City, how are you today?
Today, I am well, thank you.
You're warm.
Yes.
Good.
It's a warm day in there. Outside,
in here.
cold.
In here, you're warm. Okay. So let's welcome you into the show. At about 4 minutes after 6 o'clock, we'll have a lot to discuss today. We'll be looking about leadership in crisis. And we've been focusing a lot on Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda. And we've been forgetting about our other neighbor here called Somalia. So today we'll also look at Somalia and how Somalia is coping with COVID-19. Speaking to a journalist who's based in Mogadishu. And he'll be telling us a lot of... he'll be giving us basically insights on what's happening there. And we'll look at the twists and turns as the senators were deciding on the county billions yesterday, plus other stories. Let's begin where we always begin. So yesterday, the CS himself, Mutahi Kagwe, is the one who gave the update. And he said now you can stop consuming the Kagwes of a sausage and 2 beers and start having 2 sausages and a soda.
Right.
He's changing his menu. Okay.
Dangerous. You are dangerous. I am dangerous. We are all dangerous. This is what he said yesterday. I think that's a new thing. By the end of the day, there will be a single released. Anyway, 606 people have tested positive out of 4,888 samples tested in the last 24 hours. That was the news as of yesterday, taking the country's number of positive cases to 18,581, pushing cumulative tests to 284,500. 14 people succumbed yesterday, taking the death toll from COVID-19 in Kenya now to 299, just under 300 deaths. The world numbers, we're looking at 16,893,527, likely to get to 17 million by tomorrow. Those are the kind of numbers that we see on a daily, and it's probable that this is what we'll see. Just looking at the news around COVID, we'll probably talk about this after 8 o'clock. But the video that was in circles yesterday had quite a number of things to look at concerning that. But it took the world by storm very quickly. And unfortunately, so there are quite a number of things to look at concerning that. So we will
What video are you talking about?
This one where a group of doctors from the United States came out and made claims about the treatment of essentially what is chloroquine for COVID. Okay? The supposed doctor from Nigeria, Stella Emmanuel, having said that she had treated over 350 patients with this medication and they were fine, and there was basically saying that there was no need for masks. These doctors say previous statements. But there are very many things that we must ask ourselves when we see things like this. Yeah.
Though there are randomized trials and other trials, 2 specific ones, that did what they call a pre-exposure trying to determine whether it was a drug that could actually be used to prevent.
But the thing is, you know about this, don't you? Why do you know about this? Because it was put in the public. There was some kind of information that was published about it. There were a group of professionals who came together and put out this information. It wasn't somebody randomly standing on the stairs of a building someday saying something.
And they had data to support what they were telling you.
There you go. Data to support what it is that they were saying.
And they gave details.
This is the thing, especially with medical scientific research. You come out and say something like this, you must be able to back it. You would have written about it somewhere in a journal sometime.
What they said was very simple, that there was no benefit in preventing illnesses compatible with COVID-19.
Yeah.
What that means is that it's not that there was no benefit, but nothing significant to talk about. You see, if, for instance, of the 40 patients, let's say, for instance, who are undergoing the trial, you found that, say, 30 of them showed signs of responding positively, then you say it is significant.
Yeah.
If 5 respond, it's not significant.
It's not significant.
Yes.
This pre-exposure thing is like a vaccine.
No, pre-exposure, especially before you are exposed to it, correct, Eric? It is like a vaccine, meaning you're given the medicine. the pre-exposure and post-exposure, that particular debate or that particular notion was made popular during HIV times when it peaked. So they were antiretrovirals that had been tested. One of them was called Truvada. You could take it as prescribed, and its preventative qualities were documented, and it was seen to be effective. Okay? Once again, it was also seen that if you had unsafe sex and you were exposed and you took it after, over a period of time, it also helped. The chances of eliminating the possibility of acquiring HIV was high. So it was found to be effective. None of them will claim to be 100%. They tell you 60, 70, exactly. And there's a threshold which, when you surpass that, then it is said it can now be licensed for use because it has been proved that of the number of people who tested, and talk about now large studies, maybe over 70% of them proved that this thing worked on them. They said, no, this thing is useful.
Yeah.
If it's 20, no. 30, no.
Okay. So this, Madam, what's her name again?
Stella Emmanuel.
Stella Emmanuel. She's a doctor.
Supposedly.
She says she's a doctor. And
She says she's a doctor. The people in that group said she's a doctor.
And nobody else has confirmed this, whether she's a doctor or not.
Others have confirmed that she's a pastor.
Yeah, but a pastor can also be a doctor.
Yes, it doesn't prevent you from being both.
A doctor. No, it doesn't.
So, and she stood there and she said, I've treated people in these hospitals, for 300 people.
350 people.
And
I've treated them and they're well.
she says what hospital she's treated them at, right?
But you see, yes.
But the issue of hydroxychloroquine, she's not the first one, or that group of doctors.
She is
they're
not.
the first
No,
ones
she's
who
not. No, they're not.
They've this has been had before, even by other medical professionals. So where's the point of arguing against what she's saying?
No.
No.
I think the debate, Eric, must go on. You know why?
Because I'm looking at it from the point of even the major platforms removing that video from social media platforms. I mean, Facebook and Twitter have removed the videos. If you post that video right now on Facebook, it's going to be pulled down. President Trump posted, I think, about the same, pulled down. Why?
You know, this is now where the theories and the conspiracy theories now begin to have a field day. Okay? I think she has raised an interesting debate because of all the discussions that I have read about regarding this malarial treatment, that's what I'm calling it, any harm, adverse effect that it has not been spoken of.
No.
If there was, guaranteed it would have been spoken of.
Yeah.
All that is being spoken of is that it is not what it claims to be. And yet, there are people who are saying they have taken it and they have seen it has acted positively. In the UK, we had reports of it.
The same.
It's not just the US. The US have come into this game lately. But this discussion has been on for quite some time.
It's been there for a while.
And we've even had people stating categorically that they have seen signs of it helping. So it isn't useless. It isn't something that you can condemn and say it doesn't do anything positive. No. What often happens with medical science is this. For them to give an okay to anything, it must have gone through very many phases of testing. This is how it works. To the point where you now have multi-site studies and large numbers of people testing it in many places. And if then it is found to have the same sort of effect in all those places, they say, yes, this thing we can categorically say it is actually effective. But if it's just a small group of people in a place, it may work. But they'll say, no, that is not sufficient information for us to declare that it is what people are claiming it to be. That is how they think. But it doesn't mean it doesn't work. Let me add that. It doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Yeah.
No.
The thing is that if working, it's not an issue of 350 people having been cured, having been with COVID and then use this. The problem is that because there's so much debate around the world right now, there's so many reasons that anybody would want to shut down a cure because you want to invite the elements of big pharma, this, that, the other thing. Anything that you now come and speak about with such certainty, then unfortunately, you have to back it up.
You will have invited some very serious debate.
That's the problem. People are going to attack you because they want to know on what basis you're founding this new sentiment or this new. Okay, in this case, it's not new, but in terms of being it new, it's a reintroduction of an old subject, right? So you come and you speak with such authority, with such emotion about this being the way. It must be backed up. It can't be about how you feel that day.
But she said categorically she has treated. She was talking about experience.
Yes.
She has treated these numbers, and they have all
been well. They're well now.
They've recovered. I mean, they've
recovered.
Remember, why this thing gets a little emotive is people want a cure.
Yeah.
They forget you're not going to get a cure. It's a virus.
Yep.
You're going to get a treatment. Okay? And all these emotions are mixed up. COVID is causing upheavals that were hitherto unknown to mankind. So there's desperation in waiting for something that will remove all these many problems that may ensure you can't move, you can't drink, you can't eat, you can't go to public place, you can't go to nightclubs, you can't go to church, you can't.
Having said that, I do think that there's some very big players who would not want that kind of information out in the public.
They usually are at the heart of it, but we can't just focus on them alone as though they are the only culprits. No. Their agenda is known, and what they want to promote is also understood and known. The truth of the matter is this: whenever you have such a situation, all manner of people will come up with all manner of supposed solutions.
Yeah.
That is just the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
True. Can we look quickly at Madagascar and look at some of these numbers? There, it was an issue where the Malagasy government previously had been speaking about, the COVID herb. It doesn't seem to be working because they're now, talks of Madagascar's health system now being overly burdened. Madagascar now has 10,104 cases and 93 deaths. And they're looking at total cases per population of 1 million at 365 and total deaths per 1 million in population at 3. And they're already complaining now that they don't think they're going to be able to handle this if more people continue to get sick. So those numbers have risen sharply as we see over the last 4 weeks where...
so how many people again?
98 people have died.
98 have died. And how many positive?
10,104.
How many active cases?
Active cases in... so there are 4,500 active cases in Madagascar, with 6,613 having recovered. What we don't know is what they've used in terms of treatment.
So 4,000 active
4,500 active cases.
And these are already overwhelming their health system.
This is reports coming from the government themselves, and it seems like they've turned on what they had previously said. Yeah. So that's what it looks like. The world continues to deal with these cases.
Okay, let's take a break, then take a look at the weather, and then we come back and continue the conversation. We'll be looking at the newspaper headlines shortly and other information as well, of course, looking at how COVID is ravaging all other parts of the world as well. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. 17 minutes after 6 o'clock. Keep it right here. Shortly, we'll be looking at the big stories of the morning.
...24/7, around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM. Classic Soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM.
All right, Wednesday morning and what it looks like in the skies. Let's start off in Nairobi at 14 degrees, mostly cloudy conditions. We'll see highs of 22 and lows of 12. It's cloudy in Nyeri at 14 degrees. It's likely to have thunderstorms later, highs of 21 and lows of 13. 13 degrees and partly cloudy in Nakuru, highs of 22 and lows of 12 with wet conditions forecasted for the afternoon. Clear skies in Eldoret at 13. It'll change later though to wet conditions, highs of 18 and lows of 11. It'll be a wet afternoon in Kisumu as well with highs of 27 and lows of 18. Kakamega will follow in fine form. 16 degrees currently, highs of 23 and lows of 14 with rains coming down later on. Looking in Mombasa where it's partly cloudy at 24, it'll go to a high of 29 and lows of 23. Rain expected in Malindi shortly, highs of 28 and lows of 24. All right, in Kampala it's mostly cloudy at 19 degrees, highs of 25 and lows of 18. Dar es Salaam, clear skies this morning, 22 degrees, we'll see highs of 31. And in Johannesburg this morning at 6 degrees, we'll see highs of 18 and lows of 4 with sunny conditions all through. Clear skies in Lagos this morning at 24 degrees, however, that'll change later with highs of 29 and lows of 23. There'll be showers in the afternoon. London has clear skies and sunny conditions at 11 degrees today. We will see highs of 23 and coming down to a low of 11. 14 degrees and clear skies in Paris, in France, highs of 27 and lows of 14 with only partly cloudy conditions later. And rounding it up for now in New York, still Tuesday night, 28 degrees. It's a warm evening, giving to a warmer morning. Highs of 34 and lows of 25.
Okay, 21 minutes after 6. We'll look again at what's happening around the African continent when it comes to COVID-19, when we have that conversation with a Somali journalist, right? Mm-hmm. So for now, let's start with today's proverb, C.T. Muga.
Today's proverb, again, from the lovely and delightful
people of Africa.
African continent. If you and a fool have an argument, he wins.
If you and a fool have an argument,
he wins.
Okay, so to prove that I'm not a fool, I just let a bugger win.
This is the whole point of the proverb. Please stretch your imagination, fill in the blanks, water it if you may.
So if I feel like I'm losing an argument, I just should know that I'm not the fool.
That is certainly one way of looking at it. And I'm certain there are other ways of looking at it.
Is it?
It's comforting. You know how bad it feels when you're losing an argument.
Actually,
I can imagine when you think, this is the fool.
Why am I even bothering? So,
okay. All right. We'll be looking at what exactly the Africans had in mind when they were coming up with
Africans.
this. Yeah, the Africans. Okay. Let's take a look at the headlines, shall we?
Sure. Splashed on the front page of The Standard. Cutting Kinoti down to size. Is this a sinking ship, is the question? Hardly a week after the High Court slam brakes on him, the DCI boss suffers yet another blow after prosecution guidelines, which he is opposed to, are endorsed by his bosses. What next for the daredevil cop is the question. And looking at the story in a little bit more detail on page 6. In a move that could further seal his fate, Directorate of Criminal Investigations boss George Kinoti yesterday snubbed a government meeting that ratified new policy guidelines that will greatly impact the operations of his office. The meeting, attended by his seniors, Inspector General of Police Hilary Mutiambai, and Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i, Director of Public Prosecutions Nurdin Haji, and launched the new parameters that will determine how prosecutions are conducted in Kenya. We knew this was going to be launched yesterday with all these 3 officers in attendance. A new case management system was also launched, but Kinoti neither showed up nor sent a representative from the DCI to the meeting, whose chief guest was David Maraga, Chief Justice, and the President of the Supreme Court. The other key miss at the event at the Prosecution Training College in Loresho was Attorney General Kariuki Kihara, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission EACC CEO Twalib Mbarak. They attended. There is nothing strange about
Who attended? Mbarak attended?
Mbarak attended, Kihara did not.
Okay.
There is nothing strange about the DCI not attending, according to Mutambai. He was attending to other state functions. The DCI boss was one of the keynote speakers listed on the program. When you see the IG here, you know that Kinoti is represented. Yesterday's event came hot on the heels of a court ruling last week that frustrates DCI. In the matter, High Court Judge George Odunga ruled that the DCI had no powers to institute criminal proceedings unless the DPP gives consent.
You know, why is it that the same questions are not being asked about one, Mr. Kihara? He also did not attend.
He did not attend. Why were they not asking why he didn't? Yeah.
Mr. Kihara, remember a couple of days back, was it last week, when the same publication, The Standard, had pitted the people who were the ex-spies and the system people, saying those ones were at loggerheads, right? So who are these people in the ex-spy? The ex-spies were the IG, Mutiambai, the EACC boss, Twalib Mbarak, and the DPP, Nurdin Haji. They have had a stint with the intelligence service. And then, on the other hand, we had the Attorney General, we had the DCI, Kinoti, and we also had the head of the Assets Recovery Agency. So, it's clear what the Standard then was saying last week.
I am questioning
because those three did not attend this meeting.
I am simply questioning it by saying that what we're reading is certainly one interpretation. It can't be the only interpretation. These are government officials. These are not private businesses where you can say so-and-so decided not to. It's a government function. Yes.
So therefore, when you're listed as a spokesperson, as speaker,
something can change.
You've been invited, you're listed as a speaker.
Something can change.
Yeah.
It isn't the first time that people have been listed even as the keynote speaker, and they have not attended.
Yeah. And they send apologies.
But
it's communicated.
Have they said that he didn't send apologies?
It's communicated. If, for example, IG Mutiambai says, well, come on.
If you see me here, he's represented, so it's all right.
You know. Remember, there's
who does the DCI answer to?
That's where now the other beef comes in. That IG Mutiambai would like everybody to understand that this man is below me, right? This man answers to me. The DCI answers to the IG of police. There has been clamor by the DCI and especially the previous heads of the CID. They even presented this before the BPI committee, and they said, what we'd like is to have the DCI totally delinked from the police service and create a federal bureau of investigations called the Kenya Bureau of Investigations, an FBI sort of.
The KBI.
The KBI, okay? Which is going to work completely autonomously and
independently of the police force.
There has been that clamor. This matter that was being adjudged by Justice Odunga last week is basically also pointing to the same direction, where he's saying, look, DCI cannot bring criminal proceedings before any court. That is not his job. The job of criminal prosecution.
That's the job of the DPP or the ODPP, yes.
Yeah. The DCI will present such information.
You would have expected that to be obvious.
It sounds.
That the DCI would not do that, but we've seen that.
But that...
APA, We saw DCI taking some matters before the court.
We heard of the supposed tussle then between the officers of the DCI and that of the DPP.
We did.
Yes, so we saw that investigative officers then would have an issue. It's on the desk, it's supposed to go forward, somebody's holding on to a file. That tussle then was evident even then.
But remember, the ODPP don't investigate.
No, they don't.
Clear.
Yep.
The DCI investigates.
Yep.
It's also clear.
The EACC
Investigates.
Yes. But at the end of the day, according to our constitution and our laws, the person who has the mandate of deciding what goes to court is not them.
It's a DPP.
It's the DPP.
It's the DPP. So explain to me where the complication is. I know I'm simplifying it, but I am aware I'm really simplifying it. But really, unless now we are talking about personality issues.
Yeah. Look, we would want to say that there are officers and there are fine lines that have been drawn and everybody knows the boundaries behind which they should stand. However, it doesn't always happen that way because of the fact that you have personalities at play here.
Remember,
and the individuals who, it becomes a contest of sort because you want to say, look, I did the due diligence to get this job done. I'm going to push it as far forward as I can. And it will not be you who's going to come and tell me what to do.
Is this not the same debate that we had with the JSC, the appointment of judges, the Chief Justice and the President?
Yep.
Is this not the same sort of argument that we had?
Yep.
Who has the ultimate power?
The ultimate power to appoint.
Yes.
The ultimate power is with the JSC.
So,
It's the president, actually. Well,
well,
it's the president who appoints. That's why those people are not judges.
yes, precisely. So even when one has this discussion, there's what we call the reality check. Reality check with this discussion about the ODPP, DCI, the person who has the powers to prosecute is the office of the DPP. If they're holding on to the file, well, they're holding on to the file, aren't they? If they're not prosecuting, well, they're not prosecuting, but you've done due diligence.
If you've done your job as an investigating officer or an investigating body and you've presented that information then to the office of the DPP, then the prerogative then lies with them at that point as to when they're going to take it forward.
Which is
Actually,
why I
it
was
is.
bringing the issue yesterday when we were talking with Andrew Mule from the ODPP.
Yeah.
Yes.
If the DCI feels that really I have toiled, I have worked so hard, I have crisscrossed this country, I've put my life in danger, I've collected evidence, I've brought a file before you. And then you just look at it and like,
Okay, we'll deal with it.
I don't think there's a case here.
But remember,
What do you
What do you do?
nothing. Nothing. You finished your job. I mean,
Done your part.
think about it, Eric, for a single second. Your file is not the only file these people are dealing with, number one. In terms of priority, to you it's a priority. But to the office that you've handed the file to, it is among 3 other or 4 other or 5 other priorities. The reality is you may want to have certain powers to do certain things, but the law doesn't allow for it. This one is not even personal now. The moment you have a judge declaring this, they're telling you we've interpreted the law and this is what the law states.
Yep.
So we may feel, we may think, we may want, but this is what the law states.
This is where this is the direct interpretation of what the law has stated.
Yes. Remember that same Odunga on the issue of adolescents having sex. He was categorical and said, no, we need to change this thing because what the law states is this, and this is what I can only go by what is available.
Yeah.
And yet it is clear that there may be a miscarriage of justice because of what we have here, because understanding the age of some of these people.
Yeah. And the circumstances.
And the circumstances, yes.
Yeah.
Reality.
And their actual role in the commitment of that crime.
Yes.
28 minutes to 7 o'clock is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. We want to take a look at what's happening on the roads now. Let's interpret this for you and tell you if you are stuck in traffic on the inner lane.
You away too.
Okay. Can we start then? If you're stuck in traffic in the outer lane, will it make a difference?
Yeah, you can turn left and go.
Yeah, use the service lane. But if you're on the inner lane,
That's it.
forget it. You just wait.
Forget it. Okay, let's take a look at traffic shortly. Good morning. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation.
Waiaki Way is looking absolutely beautiful this morning. No traffic whatsoever. It'll take you about 7 minutes to get from Kangemi to the Westlands roundabout, but I wouldn't advocate for high speed. Don't say you quoted me on that one. Let's look at Jogo Road, where it's moving very well this morning as well. That's from all feeder roads, from industrial area all the way to Jogo Road, coming down from Hamza, moving then to the City Stadium roundabout. Not a problem here at all as they're trying to then get into the CBD. It looks like a good Wednesday. So far, so good. The weather in Athi River means it shows right now that it's quite dark and the clouds are quite dense and quite low today. That equals fog. So it means that you're going to have to go a little bit slower so that you can essentially see where you're going. Mombasa Road then means there's a little bit of traffic right outside the SGR leading all the way down to the JKI turnoff and then on to Cabanas after that. So you're going to need some patience while using that road. Getting onto Thika Road, inner lanes and outer lanes are moving very well right now. The service lanes also can be used as you try to get to the CBD. The southern and eastern bypasses have no problem whatsoever at this point. We're going to take a look in about half an hour and see what it looks like. But for now, guys, you are good to go. Spice FM KE on Twitter. Let us know what you see.
Okay, so things are dogs actually. And
How do you say that in Swahili?
huh? How do you say that in Swahili? Kimeumana.
Oh, okay.
That's it. You don't say vitu ni mbwa.
I was going to say, why
No.
not?
What you do is you remove a certain function that dogs are known for and throw it into the equation.
Like barking.
Biting.
Biting.
Ooh, oh,
Kimeumana.
that's what it is.
Yes. War of words between the NMS Director General Mohamed Badi and Governor Mike Sonko is exposing a power struggle for the control of the capital that's threatening to render the county's leadership dysfunctional and risks paralyzing service delivery. Did I say paralyzing? Yeah, you can add the Z.
Welcome, brother.
You can add Z in there into that whole mix.
Got it.
So yesterday, MCAs in the city county of Nairobi wanted to present an impeachment motion against the Speaker, Beatrice Elachi. Okay? And we've seen that in the last couple of days, Elachi has been supporting one person to be the clerk of the assembly, while the courts and the MCAs are supporting somebody else to be the clerk of the assembly. There's been that back and forth. Somebody who has been sworn in, the court saying, no, you cannot assume office. The other person who's been kicked out, writing a letter to the speaker saying, I have received a motion here to impeach you. You need to start preparing yourself for these hearings. So what's happening in the city county of Nairobi? But unfortunate bit is what we saw in regards to the MCA from Lango Kubwa, Patricia Model. The photos and the video clips were going all around social media yesterday of what police officers forgot to do. Yeah.
Forgot to do.
Yeah.
As in switch off the CCTV?
that could be one thing. They basically just forgot to. They forgot that it's possible that this was going to leak. What they were doing. They forgot to do their job in the manner that they should have done their job.
Whereas they should have been seen to serve and protect.
Yes.
Yes, and probably have dialogue.
Complete. I mean, this is
This was
one
unfortunate.
person.
It did need to get to this.
This is one person. Yes, you can imagine there was skirmishes and there was a scuffle because people are trying to make their way into an office, and the speaker is said to have locked herself inside those offices.
Not the first time.
And the police officers are now coming to tell people, no, move away from this particular place. Everybody else has moved. This one lady is still standing here, and they decide, you know what?
The best way.
Know what?
Let us speak to her in a language that
Yeah.
might, should we say, compel her to understand this thing better. Really necessary? No.
Absolutely
Treat her like a
unnecessary.
dog? No, not necessary.
Absolutely
Actually,
unnecessary.
that wasn't like a dog. That was like a snake.
It was worse than a dog, right?
It was like a burukenge.
Monitor lizard.
Okay. Wow.
That's like a burukenge.
Not necessary.
Not
Not
necessary.
absolutely
Horrible
unnecessary.
picture.
Yeah.
It doesn't paint a good picture.
No, this
at
one,
all.
my friend, takes you back to the Stone Age. This
For
one
real.
incident, one.
So anything that, you know what? Yeah, because I know that we've been talking about, police brutality and, the way in which they handle themselves and the manner. This was not necessary at all. Regardless of what she may have said, done, where she was standing, how she looked at anybody. Look, this now just, how you paint a picture, it unpaints the entire picture.
Yeah, completely.
for
I mean,
police.
police
Tells you
had
the
not
mindset.
dealt
This
with
is
an
one
issue.
person, for heaven's
Yeah.
sake, one.
And even before she was left alone here, police had not dealt with a situation where people are pelting them with stones.
No.
I mean, they were not in any danger or anything that could have provoked them to a point where they felt, you know what,
What was this little woman going to
draw,
do to them? Then?
Let's draw the line in the sand right here. No, they hadn't reached that
There's
point.
there's this mindset that is associated with the police, and that is when they tell you something, they're not telling you, they're instructing you.
Yeah.
And your job is to not comply, obey.
Fall in line.
Immediately. Not, don't give it thought and have a debate.
Just fall in line.
Yeah.
Quick, sharp. Now, in the absence of that, then, should we say the communication channels will change?
Right.
But you know what, this conversation we keep having about police brutality and all, and remember when we were speaking with Kiama of the
Independent
medical legal unit, right? He said something, this is very systemic. You cannot talk about 5 police officers, all of them thinking the same way, all of them
And
acting
reacting the same.
way,
Reacting the same
and
way.
none of them saying, okay, come on guys, okay, no, let's
them-
not do
That
that.
lady was
And
beaten
it's
with
just
such
sudden.
vigor.
Sudden like that. This is the rot runs pretty deep
It's
in the
deep.
system.
It's deep.
It's very, very much systemic. So the DPP released a statement later in the evening, said his attention has been drawn to this news, and he has spoken to the Inspector General of Police, and the IG has said, you know what, we've already commenced investigations.
Okay.
So he's waiting for that file. But what I say the system is, we did not hear anything from the IG of police. And this is very indicative of where the rot lies.
This is
You would have expected that the first thing you'd have heard was
Let's condemn it.
from the IG of police
Immediately.
coming out to say, you know what, this
Wrong.
is wrong. These police officers, whoever you are, first of all, just interdict, go home.
As we look into this
we
matter.
look into this matter. And we sincerely and profusely apologize to this lady, to
And
the
to the
leader,
members of the
and to
public.
members of the public for what you have been subjected to.
You know
IG
what?
of police,
This, unfortunately, the way we see it now, it's a done deal.
yeah.
It's finished.
Even if they
Investigation's
take
waiting
action,
for a file,
they'll
nothing
take
is gonna
action. You may find, these
The
officers,
opportunity to actually
IPOA
make
will
amends.
move in.
No, the opportunity has been lost here.
Yeah.
Yep.
That ship sailed.
But, hey,
Should have been an apology immediately. It should have been, a recognition that something wrong was done immediately before you do your investigations. As they say, that one is up to you. The investigations that you're going to do, or whomever you're going to bring to book, etc., that's yours.
Yep.
What everybody else needs to see was the same measure of what they saw when this woman was being brutalized.
Yep.
They needed to hear immediately a reaction from you.
And it's important that the police hear from their boss immediately that, you know what, that action, that is wrong.
So for those of you who think that you can continue doing this,
Yeah.
stand guarded, knowing that it cannot be that way.
the manner in which the IG has treated this matter amounts to condoning it.
That's
is.
what I'm saying. You basically said, all right, it's okay.
We're gonna
We'll look into it
investigate.
later and, I'll deal with it.
We'll
Ati
see.
mama alikuwa ameleta kichwa. Okay.
Okay, we'll see.
All right.
Na menzi Yesu tunawajua. Afande unakumbuka hata last time.
You know, this conversation, huh? You sometimes think that this action that we saw being meted against this lady was something that they had actually put aside specifically for university students
Yeah.
and for people demonstrating against the government. You're right,
For
Eric.
civil society and such.
It is systemic.
It's very, very systemic.
This is the natural knee-jerk reaction.
And as I'm saying that, I've just looked at there are 2 Twitter handles for the National Police Service and the Kenya Police Service. Both of them verified Twitter handles. None of them has spoken about this.
You know what I always find sad about such situations?
There's
is
no
that
statement. So I'm sure that the IG has not spoken.
there are
expressly
so
to the public.
many police officers in this country who do not fit this bill. And yet the representation that they have is daunting. And again, Nothing is being done to actually damage control.
Yeah.
And let me talk so that maybe you can spur them into action. The way you said that kimeumana, this case, imekunywa maji.
Nice one. Before we take this break, let's just look at what happened in Dar es Salaam yesterday. So the late President Benjamin Mkapa is being buried today. And there was a service that took place in Dar es Salaam yesterday. But there was also a lot of bad weather in the areas surrounding Dar es Salaam.
There was.
Yeah.
What happened?
Bad weather.
Bad weather.
So
means
what
that
happened
flights
because of
cannot
bad-
land.
Okay.
So President Uhuru had sent a team to represent him in Tanzania. And this team was led by Senate Majority Leader, what's his name? Samuel Pogisho.
Ogisho.
They got to some point. Apparently, their flight had to turn back because of what was recorded as bad weather. And of course, this sent tongues wagging. Just the previous day, the president had spoken in a manner likely to suggest that he was casting aspersions at Tanzania's response to COVID. And people were saying now this was a reaction, immediate reaction from the government of Tanzania. Unlikely, in my from my direct analysis of it or just observation. It's unlikely that something like this, a national and a regional figure and a national event like this is where such small things would play out.
Nope.
Kenya's High Commissioner in Tanzania was present, so he represented the government. But also, I've seen the story in The Nation saying that this was not the only flight that could not land. There was a delegation from Zimbabwe that also was unable to land. So it's...
What had they said about the way Tanzania is handling COVID?
The Zimbabweans. Maybe they're...
And the other people who attended, what had they said? You see,
Yeah.
it also tells you about the way we think. Man, anything that brings about some rancor, we lap it up immediately.
Faster.
You like drama now, scandal.
Yeah.
You like it.
Jump
You
into
believe it
You'll be like,
immediately.
Can we talk of drama a little bit before we go into it? NHF stops coronavirus bill payout in private hospitals.
Yes, they did.
Yes. They said they will only be paying this for patients admitted to public hospitals. And this was from one gentleman, the CEO of NHIF, Peter Kamunyo. While this is going on, Punde had not had time to become Punde.
Huku haya ya kijiri.
Exactly. The Emirates have come up with something. They have an offer valid for 31 days. Emirates has become the first airline to offer free COVID-19 insurance as it tries to get people flying again. Passengers will be covered for medical treatment, hotel quarantine, and even their funeral should they catch the virus while traveling.
So how will you know that you caught it while traveling?
While traveling, yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Before you left, you didn't have it.
It is
So
presumed.
there's a test before.
Test
Yeah.
before,
You come
you
with
didn't
a
have it.
certificate and shows that
Yes,
you're negative.
you are on the flight.
And then there's a test after.
After, when you land, yes, wherever you're going, your destination, they're going to test you.
Okay.
And they find that you have COVID,
They'll treat you.
you'll be treated, you'll quarantine. Should you happen to go on to the next realm, okay, they will also cater
cost.
for your last rites.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you're talking about people who are thinking ahead and wanting to generate business, again,
That's a nice one.
yes,
That's
it
a
is.
nice one. The NHIF and what the NHIF is basically saying, well, we'll look at that shortly. 11 minutes to 7 o'clock. It's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, the big stories of the day.
The big story on the nation. Salaries heartbreak for KNUT members. Some 32,556 teachers did not receive improved pay or get promoted from the Teacher Service Commission. Said they are under the scheme of service that is favored by their union. Okay, so let's look at details of this, okay? Thousands of teachers are reeling in shock after their employer denied them promotions and a salary raise for the second year running, citing their membership to the Kenya National Union of Teachers. Their counterparts, who ditched the giant union led by Wilson Sossion after it clashed with the Teacher Service Commission last year, are celebrating after receiving fatter paychecks this month. Some 47,131 teachers in Job Group B 5 have been promoted to Job Group C1 using the TSC's career progression guidelines, even as 32,556 of their counterparts missed out after the TSC said they fall under the schemes of service because they are members of KNUT.
Okay.
So, schemes of service contained in the Code of Regulations and Code of Conduct and Ethics for Teachers is the preferred promotion path of Mr. Sosion's KNUT, but is frowned upon by the TSC. It is this disagreement on promotions that has soured relations between the TSC and KNUT, and teachers seem to be the pawns in the high-stake battles. So, those on the side of the TSC, those who left the union last year, got their promotions. Those who remained did not. So there's a problem.
That logic is a little twisted, isn't it?
It sounds like it would be, but
There's a CBA.
yes, there's an agreement.
The KNUT.
Still twisted.
That CBA has modalities of how you shall get your
How you shall
promotion.
follow and how you shall be promoted.
Once again, it is still twisted. Who on earth negotiated that CBA and then signed it?
No, even when you decided to effect the promotions, I mean, didn't you factor in the fact that a majority of your employees are under this union that you signed a CBA with?
You did.
It goes both ways.
And if you were to protect them, perhaps those
It
things
goes
should have
both
been
ways.
taken into
Because as the
consideration while you
employer,
were
when you're
signing.
coming up with, it appears like you signed an MOU with a union here, a CBA with a union, and then you decided, so this is what the CBA says. I am going to effect promotions this way, so that I'm not tied down to this CBA.
You know, let me explain what is influencing my thinking. It is, you see, a CBA, by its very nature, is intended, well, one, to benefit the employee.
Yep.
Okay. And also, it's not intended to actually kill the employer.
Yep.
But just an understanding that is arrived at when factors that influence the working space and the worker have been considered, and they say this would be a good way to go about it. All right? Now, where the issue comes in, and this is where my thinking is influenced by agreements that are signed, and then when they're operationalized, you get a picture that seems a little off, and you wonder,
What's going on here?
yeah, well, was this not considered when this was being signed? And sometimes, and this is the reality, you can't think of everything, can you? Sometimes, when you operationalize it, is when certain things become
When
obvious.
things are stuck
but
up.
in the absence of that, you really won't know, and you really can't tell. So, that was how my thinking went.
It's basically just pushing this fight between the TSC and the KNUT.
Right, and Sossion believes that what they're trying to do essentially is to snuff out the existence of the KNUT
Yep.
in its entirety,
Yep.
and just have the TSC as the operational body for teachers.
How
in
would
the
you
country.
operationalize something that is...
But look, how can their functions be similar? This is a union.
This is a union, the other is a commission. So,
Yes.
I mean,
The
one is
commission
employer,
can't be a
one is
union.
employee, yes.
one is the
The
employer.
union can't be a commission.
You can't teach in the country unless you're a member of the TSC,
One
for
is
crying out
employer,
loud.
one is employee.
So,
And if you look at the history of bodies such as NAT, it was really basic. How to ensure that there is representation for the workers, so that there's one voice speaking for all these people.
that's what a union
Because
does.
they realized
yeah.
that in the absence of that, they were helpless.
Yep. This one, I don't know. just gonna throw it will be messy. It will
It
be
will.
noisy.
It will. It will.
You will see it anyway.
Does it have to be really?
It does
It
not
doesn't.
have to be, of course.
Doesn't.
Okay. Page 10 of the Standard. Nor safety gear nor pay. The risky life of health volunteers. And this is basically looking at the community health workers and volunteers across the country and what's happening to them. So first of all, they don't have access to PPEs. And then, they don't get paid. So it tells the story of Caroline Munjiro, who wakes up at 5 a.m. daily to prepare the day's meals for her 2 children. And then she embarks on her newfound mission of sensitizing the community on COVID-19 pandemic. As Kenyans fear visiting households due to the transmission, this 39-year-old community health volunteer wears a brave face as she walks from door to door, educating locals on preventive measures. Then she has been assigned 100 households. She keeps monitoring and evaluating them daily using the Ministry of Health register. She also documents hand-washing initiatives in households, salons and butcheries before a report is handed to a community health extension worker who forwards this to the Ministry of Health for policy making. She's a nutritionist by training. She's among community health volunteers who were trained by the county 2 weeks ago in Nakuru to help the fight against COVID-19. Now, here is the issue. According to the health report, Nakuru County has 4,040 community health volunteers. About 1,000 of them were trained on COVID-19. Medical Services Chief Dr. Solomon Sirma says these volunteers only get some incentives, but he cannot even state how much they're paid. So the issue is, what kind of support are you giving to these important people at the community level?
The person.
County has 4,000. Can you imagine 4,000 community health volunteers? That's a good number.
That's a good number. And there's somebody who is giving them or assigning them duties on a daily.
And expecting reports.
And expecting results from what it is that they've sent them out to do. Wouldn't it be that you would apply some kind of humanity to this and say these individuals should at the very least be given something that is going to then encourage them to continue? It would only make sense that this is what it would be. You're putting yourself in harm's way. At the same time, then you don't have something to compensate for this work that you're doing. Yes, you're a volunteer, but we know that volunteer comes along with anything as a stipend at the very least for something to be done. And you depend on them for a very vital role that is being filled here.
Call it transport reimbursement.
Whatever you want to call it, yeah.
But it is necessary.
Yes.
And the role they play, believe me, far outstrips whatever minimal cost that you may be putting out.
Yeah.
But for some reason, the decision makers in the counties and elsewhere have never considered this to be important. And I was thinking about it as we were speaking, and I realized, given the areas where HIV was prevalent, I can speak and say I understood why. They felt that was the job of the donors and the NGOs who are battling HIV. No, sincerely, they didn't think that was their job.
The government was not...
No. The county government don't feel that is really, really, really their job.
Yeah.
Not really.
So what was their job?
Other things.
Everything else.
Everything else
not
but...
this.
Yes.
Wow.
This
But
Caroline, who's been featured in this story, she gives a story. She says she spends up to 300 shillings weekly to photocopy the several documents that she has to do this to report. She was only given one fabric face mask when COVID-19 was reported. Since then, because of the dangers, she keeps buying for herself surgical masks. How does she earn her living? She sustains herself through poultry farming. She has 30 chicken and she also makes soap, which she sells locally. So she's going around telling people, she sells them, I can sell you soap. And that's how she makes her money.
Just pause for a second and just think of the priority that all these wonderful leaders of ours who tell us wonderful things, the priority they actually give health matters. Just think for a second.
Yep.
And the minimal cost that is actually required for this to work well. And yet they do next to nothing to ensure that this thing is actually done. Let me talk about something on a slightly positive note. Mombasa Port rethinks strategy as Dar es Salaam eyes bigger market share. Competition is a good thing. One, Kenya Ports Authority ensured that the port charges for containers that come into the port have no charges. Dar es Salaam, same. But the cost of moving goods from Mombasa to, say,
That's where the
Kampala,
cost would come.
yes, and even to Rwanda, Kenya has actually been reducing its costs per container, 40-foot container. Kenya moved it from $3,400 to $2,500. Tanzania, on the other hand, moved from 2,500 in 2011 to 4,500 last year, which means the Kenya port still offers cheaper.
Yeah. It's more competitive.
Yes. Now, that is a positive thing. It means there are people who understand what needs to be done and they are
actually doing
Doing it.
Yes.
It's important. Coming up to the top of the hour, 7 o'clock, this is a situation on Kenya's biggest conversation. Shortly, we'll also be joined by our audience on KTN Home. Remember, our live stream is up, www.spicefm.co.ke, as well as Spice FM KE on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. In the next hour, let's talk about leadership in terms of a crisis. I'm speaking to somebody who really understands this matter, right? Good morning, it's 7 o'clock.
It's smooth all the way on Thika Road from Safari Park to Muthaiga. It's looking very good this morning, guys. Mombasa Road, also from Simba Cement towards Athi River, is clear. Also inbound to the city is not so bad. Traffic is slow, but it is moving, and it is also very cold. The clouds are quite low today on Mombasa Road, so everybody's going to be moving just a little bit slower, and it might contribute to a little bit of traffic in a short while. All right, looking into the CBD, seems to be a bit clogged up, guys, getting in from Thika Road, but you'll be able to open up in a short while. Coming out of Westlands, we said, is flowing absolutely beautifully as well. Gong Road looks good, as does Langata Road, and coming out of Westlands looks superb too. So I think it might just be a good day. We'll see how things change after 7 o'clock. Let us know what you see as well, guys. Spice FM KE on Twitter. It would be nice to know if you're stuck anywhere or if you see something that everybody else needs to know. We have quite a number of people exercising on the roads this morning, guys. Remind those who you see to have reflective gear on.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation.
This is also
a
Kenya's
talk
biggest conversation.
radio
And every
experience
morning
like
between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m., we're here, CT Muga, Nduoko, Eric Latif, to reflect on the big conversations in the country and around the world. Before we start the conversation for this hour, CT Muga, today's proverb.
If you and a fool have an argument, he wins.
If you and a fool have an argument, he wins. Be happy when you lose an argument.
That's certainly one positive way of looking at it.
One way of looking at
You
it.
don't always have to win an argument. Not really.
Okay.
Put in Kiswahili is even better. Si lazima.
Imagine it's not a must. Putting it Kenyan
It's
is.
not a must.
Imagine it's not a
Imagine.
must.
Or
Okay.
silence is the best answer for a fool.
Ah, right. That too.
Actually, the Bible quotes it and puts it very well that by keeping silent, even he who is foolish can be thought to be wise. Proverbs, not me.
Solomon, not CT.
No.
All right.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about innovative leadership in times of crisis like now.
Yeah, times of crisis around the world is what we're seeing, that every country on the globe is in a position they never expected to be in when, the world crossed over into 2020 a few months ago. There had been talk of, COVID, for example, in countries in the Eastern Hemisphere. So China was already suffering from this. They had already talked about this. But most countries did not expect that they would be at a place where they are currently. And you find that in order to get yourself out of it, or at least to be able to manage it in a way that you seem as if you have both feet on the ground, leaders then would need to step up to make sure that people are, number one, well taken care of, that they're protected, and that policies for government are put in place that then would make sure that whatever then you came up with thereafter would be closely adhered to. Several agencies, departments that needed to fall in line to make sure that this work was being done is actually done. You would say that there is a crisis in every country in the world now, thanks to the pandemic. Previously, you could say that there were crises in many countries when it came to economic issues. But from one time to the next, any administration, any political leadership is going to find themselves in a position of crisis. Now, the question is, or the issues that we find ourselves facing at this time is, can you rely on your leaders in a position or in a time of crisis? What more would you need to call on your leaders for when it came to these? Would you say that you need to be more innovative? Would it mean that you needed to be more creative? Would it mean that you needed to put more opinions in the pot to make sure that people are being taken care of? I think there's a lot then that is called upon leaders to do when these times come about. How then do we handle it? What do you demand of your leaders? What do they feel the responsibility is when it comes to times like these? There's been a lot of hue and cry that, in handling things, let's say when it has come to just COVID, that leaders have not handled this in the manner in which they should. So do leaders need to go on a crash course, for example? Do they need to pull out something out of the hat? Like
do they need a webinar?
Something extra? Do they need a Zoom meeting? Does something need to be done when it comes to times of crisis? Or is it something that they should always have on the back burner that they can pull out from when a time like this comes?
One would expect, though, that as a leader, you should be prepared for good times and bad times.
Absolutely, that's the thing.
You should be ready to make tough decisions, especially during the bad times. That's why the tough decisions really bite or really have an impact, right? Because you are going through turbulent times and that everybody has their attention focused on you. And whatever decision you're making at that point is really, really having an impact.
What are the ingredients of a tough decision? What makes a decision tough?
Well, when the impact on some people is going to be uncomfortable, I would say that's a tough decision. Whereby something has to suffer in this decision that you're making, it's difficult. You would like it to be easy, where that across board everything is comfortable. But when it becomes tough, means that one side is going to suffer more than you would like it to.
And in some cases, you may find that the majority would suffer. It's not going to be the most popular decision that you make. Popular decisions is because, well, everybody's like, we like that.
This one.
That's a good one.
An example of a popular decision is let's open up the economy. And let's shut the economy down.
Let's shut the economy.
That's the difficult one.
Yep.
Because it's not popular.
It's not popular.
But is it effective? Is it useful? Is it needed?
Depending again on what your outcome is, like I keep saying, if your intention is, for example, to stop the spread of corona.
Or to win a popularity contest.
Yep.
There you go. If that is your intention and say, look what we did. We shut down the economy and people did not die. Then it becomes very difficult because then what are you doing? People's livelihoods out the window. People's ability to earn out the window. So it's tough. But guess what? People are not getting sick and dying.
Other tough decisions. You look at your budget, you look at how much you're able to raise, and then you decide, you know what, a lot of this money is going into paying salaries, and you decide that you're going to cut back on salaries, or you're going to reduce the size of your what is called a bloated workforce. That's a tough decision.
You're going to look at the development projects that you have.
Yep.
And you're going to ask yourself the question, do we need these things now? We need it, but do we need it now? And then what must we do? Can we then redistribute this money to cope with this danger that we now face and which threatens all of us?
Yes.
Tough decision.
Or you as a leader look at this, you look at the leaders under you who are, for example, making crazy trips around the globe for benchmarking and other things. And you say, you know what, as it is, our economy is already suffering. We need some extra money here or there to make things work. No more traveling. And it could hurt you in the future because then somebody could rally around and say, this individual, we're not putting them back in because look at the way in which they cut our wings. Tough decision.
The government has given you money to ensure that you are prepared to deal with any COVID occurrence that may be in your county. And you can't really easily explain what that money has done or where it has gone to. Tough decision. You ensure that the law is followed to the letter in ensuring that if there was any malpractice, if there was anything that didn't meet the close scrutiny that such matters must be given, then the law must take its course. Irrespective of your position, irrespective of your place, irrespective of your title, or your connections or your political party.
Or how am I may like or not like you.
Yes.
Or just looking and seeing that you've become completely unpopular because of the stupid decisions that you've made in the past. And you make the tough decision to quit,
Yes.
leave office, step down. Tough decision. Innovative leadership in times of crisis. Let's speak to somebody who's an expert in this, Executive Director of the Global Peace Foundation, Kenya. Daniel Juma Omondi joins us on the line. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Eric.
Welcome
And
to the
everyone
Situation Room.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Everyone
this
else.
morning.
Everyone else
Everyone
greets
else
you.
greets you too. Good morning.
Good morning, Oko. Good morning, Muga.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm happy to be with you here this morning. This is my first time in your show.
And we welcome you.
It's very refreshing. Yeah, asante sana. Thank you.
Karibu. Daniel, you've had our introduction to this. The topic is innovative leadership in times of crisis. We are in a crisis. There's a global pandemic. So the entire world is in a crisis. And we're looking at leaders, and people have just been even comparing and saying, oh, look at the countries that have handled this crisis so well. And look at the kind of leader that they have. Look at the gender of their leader. All these conversations are happening, at whatever forums in our community. What is it that you would define as innovative leadership in such a time?
Thank you, Eric. The real test of leadership does not occur when everything is smooth sailing. True leadership, is tested during a crisis. And the way a leader behaves and acts during crisis will establish their credentials as a good leader or a poor one. And as you see around the globe right now, we are presented with a crisis. And you can see, especially the countries such as New Zealand, Germany, Finland, you can see that when this crisis occurred, they took steps, immediately to be able to manage it. And most of these crises, even in Taiwan, I think they were able to actually implement, measures to ensure that the coronavirus was controlled. But look at other countries, for example. I'll just give you examples. For example, Brazil. Look at what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
I think now the second largest, I think the third, biggest casualty. And also, not far away, you can see what's going on in the U.S. And right now, the campaigns in the U.S. is about coronavirus. President Trump is actually running against the coronavirus. That is his biggest opponent.
Mm.
And you can see also locally, and I said it one day, that when these crises happen, when we started hearing about the Wuhan virus, you could see that our own local leadership, did not wake up immediately. I think it took a headline, from the Standard, to really wake them up. We were still flying to China, Wuhan, and then one CS was saying that they will not stop flying to China, and eventually they stopped flying to China and to every other places. So innovative leadership is the leadership, that applies creativity, that applies innovation to find solutions for your people. When you have been given the mantle of leadership, it is your responsibility to lead. If you are a teacher, you have to lead in your classroom. If you are a politician, you have to lead in government. If you are a minister, it is your responsibility, to provide leadership. If you are the president, whatever happens, if your nation is attacked, that is your responsibility. The buck stops with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is my take on that.
What is your outlook on, let's take Kenya as an example, since we're here now. Do you think leadership so far on this, just COVID, let's not talk about things that were happening before in terms of the economy and such. Let's take COVID as an example, since it's right front and center. How would you feel in terms of innovative leadership that the leadership that we currently have has performed?
On this, it is very. I think there are individuals in leadership that have actually tried to do their best. For example, when it comes to COVID, we have seen, of course, the president leading from the front, and also CS Mutahi Kagwe has been, on the front, giving what I can call mentorship every day, to the people. I've been listening to his speeches and presentation, just telling, urging people to stay at home, urging people to, to eat well. And, his speeches have been actually mentorship, sessions for very many other people. But of course, we have seen also other people, other leaders, and you could see when you had the president's speech the other day, he castigated some leaders who are not showing a good example. For example, an open example is Senator Sakaja, who is the chairman of a COVID Senate committee, and he is responsible for making the rules that we are all following as the people. But you could see that he does not believe in the rules that he is himself involved in making, and then it's kind of like preaching wine and drinking water. And of course, give it to him. He recognized that, and he apologized, and he was able to resign from that position. So, what is lacking in Africa and Kenya, and of course, is that leaders do not take responsibility. But if you look at
excuse me,
like
sir,
Korea,
when you say they don't take responsibility, what do you mean?
I mean, they make laws, and then they think the laws are for the people, for the small man in the street. And they don't think that the law applies to them. You can see when you're driving to town, most of the time, a GK, the powerful minister is overlapping, and the common man is expected to actually be the one to obey that law. Yep. So that is how we are supposed to start. A leader should lead by example, not by what you say. I need to see you, in the process of leading. If I don't see you obeying your own laws and regulations, then you have no responsibility, you have no moral authority to actually be in leadership. I'll give an example of Korea. I've stayed in Korea, and I've seen in Korea, if, for example, a leader is not just suspected, or the media is talking that a leader, is corrupt, or just a
which Korea are you speaking about, North or South?
I'm talking about South Korea. North Korea. Yes. Now, just the fact that people are talking about it, you find, a minister will resign from that position, and because he does not want to bring that position to disrepute. But that does not happen in Kenya. Here in Kenya or in Africa, someone is accused, taken to court, charged, and he says, I will not resign. It's a big, big problem. So there is no moral and innovative leadership locally. And you can count a few, that are trying to lead from the front, that are trying to provide a good example. And that is what we need. Mostly, leaders need to they need to show a good example. For example, the political meetings that are ongoing. You can see, Western leaders have been chased around by police, yet they know they should be keeping distance. They should be staying at home, and they have been running battles with the police, and they know this is not something they should be doing. So when they're doing that, what do you expect the common man in the village to do?
Well, Daniel, there are very many who argue that when you talk about this leadership and the kind of yardstick that you use to judge our leaders, that they say you should look at the context. Don't look at South Korea, for example, and their context and impose it on a Kenyan context, which may be different in terms of the expectation of the population, the people that you're leading, and also the standards that have been set by the people themselves of their leaders. So, for instance, I've just heard you say that, looking at the CS for Health, Mutahi Kagwe, the president himself, and how they've been talking, and appearing to lead the fight against COVID-19, and you're already ticking boxes and saying, all right, look, because of how they speak, we can see leadership.
Yeah, I just gave you an example that I think first when you speak it, we can see their intention. I'm not saying they're 100% correct. There are still questions that, of course, the leadership will have to answer. For example, how are they spending the money that is meant for COVID? There should be absolute transparency in the way the money is being expended, and I think Parliament, the responsibility of Parliament, to be able to interrogate government expenditure. I think the parliamentary committee, will have to, of course, ask these hard questions. So I don't want to cast aspersions right now on that, because that has been the biggest question coming, from the people. But what I meant is that it is the responsibility of the president to speak, to say the right words. We need to hear the right words from him. And as he says the right words, we need also to see him doing those things. And that's why I was happy when he himself was castigating, his senator, and you could hear people saying that one of the reasons that alcohol sale has been banned was because of that particular incident.
But Mr. Juma, the same president then proceeded to praise the governors. What on earth was he praising the governors for, when they have not been able to account for the monies that they've been given specifically for COVID? They themselves have presented statistics that are false by telling us that only 21 counties were not ready yet, when an inspectorate or inspection process that was actually occasioned by the president himself turned out that only 5 counties were actually prepared. So, and here he was patting them on the back. What was he patting them on the back for?
I personally have been disappointed by the way most of our governors have expended, have utilized this money, for COVID. In his previous speeches, he picked out a few governors, governors of Busia, Siaya, where I come from. These counties, they haven't done a good job, and health was devolved, and if you see the health situation in most of these counties, they're in a sorry state. So I think COVID gives them an opportunity to be able to correct, the health infrastructure in those counties, but they have not done that. So, I don't know, maybe it could be political correctness or what, but I would not agree that the governors, personally I would not agree that the governors have done a good job. But the president has a right to his opinion on that, but I disagree with him on that.
Do you think these governors actually have the ability to do what is right?
The governors have the moral, responsibility to do what is right. People expect them to do what is right. It is very sad that almost 7 years after devolution, and especially when health was devolved, that we are still talking about the basic health infrastructure. Some hospitals, if you go, you'll not even find, basic, for example, we are talking about COVID, but you will not find adequate PPEs. I had complaints, for example, in other places, that even the nurses, the doctors don't even have PPEs. Some, they are reusing, for example, face masks. Not even the N95 face mask. Some are using the cloth face mask. Huh? Yep. They don't have access to that. So, if you go to the counties and inspect what is going on, and even talk to the people, or even the health practitioners, you will find that there's a big problem. They don't have adequate PPEs, and I am sure that the people have been saying that the people have a responsibility to speak out, and name and shame those governors that are not utilizing the funds that are given to them, in a proper manner.
Okay, so in this case, where we see all of these things seeming to be going wrong, an innovative leader who was thinking about pushing the country in the right direction, what would you suggest they do at this point?
at this point, and for me, if I was in position of leadership immediately, when the coronavirus was announced, I would have basically listened to science, relied on what the scientists are saying, and number one would have been to completely, seal off our borders, cancel flights from the countries that were affected. That was the first thing that I would have done, and number two was to ensure that you have the basic, the required, protective equipment to be able to manage, especially to protect the health practitioners. And number three, in Kenya, and in Africa, our social welfare system is still very, very poor. If you go to the U.S. now, my brother, lives abroad in Canada, and when this came up and they were asked to stay at home, they receive government stipend, which is even $500 per week. But I realize that we are not able to do that. We cannot. We are not able to implement full lockdown because we cannot afford to feed our people.
Really?
Even basic feeding our people. That is the reality.
Or is that the message that's being put out there? A message versus the real ability to do, because those are two totally different things.
I think this is where now we've gone right into what we are discussing, because this is where innovation, in terms of innovative leadership in such a time of crisis, comes in. You have a population that would require social protection. You are looking at yourself, you're saying maybe you have budgetary constraints, you have an economy that is not as strong as others that you're talking about. So what is it that a leader should do during such a time? Daniel Juma is the Executive Director of the Global Peace Foundation. We are speaking with him this hour. We are looking at that, innovative leadership in terms of crisis, taking this particular crisis that we are dealing with now and looking at what is it that you would expect an innovative leader to do. What kind of ideas would you expect to come out through innovative leadership? There are very many things that have been done that maybe you can tick the boxes and say this was innovative, and then there are others maybe that we could point out and say an idea like this could have been explored further. For instance, 26 minutes after 7 is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM, Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri and Malindi, and also on KTN Home. We're taking a quick break. We'll be back shortly.
All right, it's warming up just a tad in Nairobi. We still have partly cloudy conditions. The fog will be quite low in some parts of the city. However, we'll see a high of 22 and lows of 12 today. In Nyeri, cloudy conditions at 14 degrees. We'll see highs of 21 with wet conditions in the afternoon and lows of 12. It's partly cloudy in Nakuru at 13 degrees, highs of 22 and lows of 12. And looking into Eldoret, where it's going to be a wet day, highs of 18 and lows of 11 with thunderstorms forecasted for later. All right, let's take a look then into Kisumu, where it's partly cloudy at 19, highs of 27 and lows of 18 with showers expected later on. In Kakamega, it's mostly cloudy at 16 degrees. Highs of 23 and lows of 14 with thunderstorms in the forecast for today. All right, taking a look at the coastal towns, it's light rain showers already commenced in Mombasa at 24 degrees, likely to be a wet day through till Thursday. Highs of 29 and lows of 23. In Malindi, it's partly cloudy and light rain showers actually of 24 degrees, highs of 28 and lows of 23. We'll take a look into Kampala, where it's partly cloudy at 18 degrees, highs of 25 and lows of 17. In Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, the sun is shining, and at 21 degrees, we'll see those warm conditions through till highs of 31. Johannesburg at 5 degrees. It's cooling down still this morning, highs of 17 and lows of 4. And finally, for now, in Lagos, clear skies at 23 degrees, highs of 29 and lows of 23, promising to be a wet day in Lagos. All right, Kiambu Road is a mess, guys. We got to say kudos to the traffic police, however, trying to keep things in order there. Then trying to join with Thika Road is likened to a spectator sport, unfortunately. The express on Thika Road, then heading towards the city, wouldn't look too terrible. Let's take a look at Naivasha Road today, and it's very slow because the matatus are being stopped, actually checking who may have overfilled or not. Ngong Road, though, as you approach the city mortuary roundabout, I beg your pardon, is looking very good. No traffic there whatsoever. Mombasa Road still dark in some areas. The fog is quite low further ahead, but you'll be all right. As you get to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout, however, you'll slow down as you get onto Uhuru Highway. It'll slow down all the way to Westlands, but it'll open up in a short while. Let us know what you see if you are stuck. Spice FM KE. That's how you can reach us on Twitter. We'd like to know where you might be stuck so we can share that information with others.
Nine minutes to 8 o'clock. The conversation continues. This is the Situation Room on Spice FM. Also live streaming on www.spicefm.co.ke as well as our social media handles. Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. In the room is Eldoret, Ndwoko, joining us is Daniel Juma. Daniel is Executive Director of Global Foundation Kenya, and we are talking about innovative leadership.
Spice up your life.
We started by trying to define what innovative leadership would be. It's about, and Daniel says that it's making decisions during the tough times shows the kind of mettle that you have as a leader. In a time like this, when you have COVID-19, it's the kind of decision that you make, and also when you make that decision, and the kind of action that follows the decision that you've made, and ensuring that the decision that you've made has been implemented as well to the ground. That all brings in the innovative leadership. As we went into the break, Daniel, you talked about, you gave the example, for example, of your brother who's in Canada and they were told, stay indoors, there's a lockdown. And then the government was able to roll out a social protection program immediately, where they're receiving up to $500, is it $500?
Dollars a week.
A week. And then you said, maybe this was not possible for Kenya. And CT Muga was like, really? Now pick it up from there.
Thank you, Eric. One of the things that even not just Canada, but also US, Europe, they have a strong, social protection system. and that has come in handy to be able to assist the government to implement either total or partial lockdown. This is lacking in Africa, and this is one of the reasons why, for example, Kenya, we're not able to do a total lockdown, because if you do that, what's going to happen to the population? You have to get them food, and you could see what was happening. Politicians actually took advantage.
Mr. Mondi, why do you think we cannot have a total lockdown?
It has actually happened in Africa.
I mean, I'm just telling you. I mean, it's not. I mean, it happened maybe in South Africa, and maybe
in Uganda.
kind of in Uganda,
in Rwanda.
Yes, but
so are we saying that we are poorer than Rwanda and or Uganda?
I think we are rich. We are very rich. But that is a question, that I think the Treasury has to answer. I'm not able to answer that. I think it required leadership, in terms of government, to come up with a system. And I saw in Mombasa, Joho tried in the beginning. Governor Joho, he tried to demonstrate that he was capable of feeding the people of Mombasa, but that was not replicated in other counties. But again, if you go into Mombasa, some people are saying that was just politics. But in real sense, that whatever he was trying to do was not reaching the people. What I'm saying is that I think if you look at the country, for example, we have a system which the government has tried to implement. Inaitwa pesa kwa wazee, where they've been sending a little bit of money to selected old people in the.
It's called Inua Jamii.
Inua Jamii.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is the semblance of the social protection system we want. But I remember one day I was in the Senate, where Senator Naomi Wako presented a bill in Parliament on how to be able to control the problem of terrorism. And then in my presentation, I said that one of the most important things that we need to do, if even to demonstrate our capability of social protection, I said that we must ensure that, number one, there is no street children in Nairobi and all over in our urban areas. That the government should at least be able to provide homes and be able to ensure that these street children are taken care of. Because these are the people who will be available for misuse and for recruitment by extremists. I remember saying that, and I said that the government needs to invest in the future. So if we are able to take care of these young people in the streets, give them education, and then empower them with entrepreneurship, with skills, then they will be able to become productive citizens. They'll be able to become economic citizens who pay taxes to the people. But when we only focus on giving money to the old people who will not be productive after that, and leaving out these young people who are the future of the nation, then I thought that was misplaced. I said that, I recommended that a law should be passed, to ensure that everybody is accountable for his children. Like Eric, if you have 2 or 3 children, you need to account. Say that I am Eric Latif. I have 3 children. I'm living with 3 now. I have maybe several out of wedlock, so that you are able to take care of all your children. So if every person can account for their kids, for their children, then we are able to control the issue of... So
you say you presented this before Senate?
Yes, I presented this before Senate.
What reaction did you receive when you came up with such a preposterous thought?
I remember some of the senators. Senator Wetangula was in that committee, and it was very controversial. It was not well received at that time.
And what was the feedback? I mean, what were the senators telling you?
Yeah, the senator was basically, most senators want to be politically correct. Some basically are very, very careful that they are not able to come up with laws that will basically, and some of them, I'm not saying the same, but, everyone is a culprit here. We have many, many Kenyan leaders, Kenyan politicians, Kenyans who are basically deadbeat. They don't know where their kids are. And, if it saddens me when I walk in Nairobi and I see street children. And these children have mothers, they have uncles, they have relatives.
Some of them are on the streets with their mothers.
Yes, and if I go to the rural area, why don't I see street kids for example, in my village in Uganda? Because we have an extended family model, where even if someone's father died, the relatives will take care of them.
Yeah.
I went to Zanzibar. We have also that kind of system. You'll not find street kids in Zanzibar. They have an extended family model. But here we have, people do not want to take care of their kids. Some of these kids have their mothers and relatives. Why can't they take care of these children? These are the future of the nation. I've always said that a big population, the youth birth, should never be considered. It's an asset. It should never be considered a burden. Africa has the youngest population of young people, and this should be an asset that we can nurture to develop our economies. If we had a population, other countries have a population of old people who are not able to actually contribute to the economy. So our young population is an asset that leadership can use innovatively to be able to develop this nation.
You stood for public office at some point. Let's say that you were at the table now and we are looking at, an area over which you had then, authoritative jurisdiction. What would you do to innovate, to create, to bring in things on the table to make the livelihoods of people better, for example, with what we are facing with COVID-19? What specifically would you do that would show that you were forward-thinking as a leader?
When I ran for Member of Parliament in Uganda in last year's by-election, my manifesto, and you can see my manifesto, is published in my website, danieljuma.com. I basically, and one of the things that I wanted to do, and one of the failures of our leadership today, is that they have something called legislative oversight. That you can apply legislative oversight to solve some of the problems of our people. For example, and it has been done before, you could see, when sexual offenses was a big issue in this nation, Joaquin Dungu, when she was nominated Member of Parliament, basically came up with a sexual offenses bill that was able to revolutionize how we address the issue of sexual offenses. Why is it that our members of Parliament are not able to legislate? We pay the money. They have a budget for research. Why can't they use research to come up with legislative solutions which would then force the executive to be able to implement some of these issues? Like, for example, having a proper, well-organized social welfare system can be legislated. But our members of Parliament are not doing that. Our members of Parliament are busy managing CDF. CDF should have been moved to the executive. The role of member of Parliament is legislative and oversight.
So when you say the executive, which executive should CDF be moved to?
The
county government?
Of course, the executive, of course, national government and the county government, I'm sorry to say.
But the county governments that we have in this country haven't really demonstrated, or they haven't shown a very, very good record of managing the monies that they are given.
Come on, CT. Beef. Really?
No. If I'm to go by what we've seen with the COVID money, there is very little that shows me that they have managed the monies that they've been given for COVID well.
This is picking one issue and just making it like, the representative of everything.
Yes, actually, I am.
So which government, both county and...
I'm talking about county governments.
Which government, both county and national has demonstrated capacity to
the national
manage
government
money well?
Had capacity to have the money to give to the county government. The county governments have not shown capacity for utilizing this money. I'm specifically talking about COVID money well.
But what I'm saying is that the legislators, the MCAs and the members of parliament, their role is to oversight the executive.
Yep.
And one of the failings of our system today is that MCAs think that they're employed by the governors. When governors give them money to run around, go for benchmarking, then you will not hear impeachments in those county governments. But when the governor is not able to give them allowances to go to benchmarking, then you hear this impeachment. What you saw in Kirinyaga County, could have been replicated. There are more sins that have been done in other counties, that are worse, but it's just that the MCAs are in bed with governors. They are not performing their legislative and oversight functions.
Why?
Our constitution, envisaged, because the kind of system we have today requires that it is the role, the body that should play opposition and oversight is the legislature. Parliament is in a position to actually, play oversight. For example, with COVID and all this, Parliament, have a right. And whether you're in position of government, as long as you're in Parliament, you are there on behalf of the people. And I've always said that leadership is about the people. That when you're in Parliament, you are there on behalf of the people. You should ask these hard questions on behalf of the people. The members of Parliament should be asking, why are we not able to afford money to feed the people during a lockdown? But the members of Parliament are not asking these questions. And that is why I ran for Parliament. Those are the kind of things that I hope I would be able to.
Probably they ask the questions, Daniel, and then they also get the answers and they get the responses. They're alive to the realities of the day. Remember, our Parliament is also a budget-making Parliament. So they are aware of the capacity of government to roll out such programs. They are aware of the capacity of government at present, for example, to address the COVID-19 pandemic.
And the fact that they're in charge of the budget-making process is the more reason why, they are in a better position to actually allocate money, to address the kind of issues that we're talking about. A social, even a semblance of a social welfare system, should have been demonstrated during the COVID era, that this was the time for the government to prove that they are in a position to feed their people in times of a crisis. This was the time that they were able to demonstrate that. And just like you said, Rwanda, doing that, and also Uganda, but you could see that happening in Europe. Without a total lockdown, it is not easy to contain the coronavirus pandemic. And that is the kind of leadership I think we need, especially in times of a pandemic like we have today.
Daniel, do you think it's possible to have forced, innovative or creative leadership?
Absolutely, it is possible. And that's why countries like Singapore, and it takes a leader to inspire a nation. And an innovative leadership, an innovative leader should inspire their citizens, to innovate, to even to obey the rule of law.
I understand. What I'm saying, Daniel, is forced innovative leadership. So you see, for example, that things have gone to the dogs in the country and the citizens are not getting what it is that they should. Because if you're talking about leadership then being for the people, it's not happening, right? So who then takes responsibility when it's not happening? Because if a leader is not being transformational, if a leader is not being reformist, for example, the people continue to suffer. Who puts that leader to account?
The people, it's the responsibility of the people who elect that leadership to make that leadership account. I'll give you an example. Right now in the United States of America, you could see originally President Trump did not take the issue of coronavirus seriously. At some point, he stopped even having coronavirus sessions. But when the numbers kept going up, the other day he had to come out in the open and say that he supports the usage of masks. At some point, usage of masks in the U.S. was a political issue. and it became, it was a divisive issue. And at the end of the day, when the numbers, his poll numbers were going, were going down, he had to come and actually be able to acknowledge, the use of masks and to start taking the coronavirus seriously. So I think it is the people and the instrument, just like we have, and the media here is very, very critical. The role of the media, I think most of the time the media plays opposition. It is you, the media, who should always provide a wake-up call to the leadership by, articulating these issues. Some of the people in the rural areas, for example, where I come from, in Uganda, you find that illiteracy levels are so high. So leaders, especially crooked leaders, take advantage of the illiteracy of the people. For example, to misuse the CDF money, the money for the CDF, I can tell you for free, almost 30% of the CDF is basically stolen by members of parliament through proxies. This is an open secret. But who is doing something about it? And that's one of the reasons why the members of parliament, fought the decision to the court issue. I think it was taken to court by Omtata, where they wanted to prevent the members of parliament from controlling the CDF. But then they went around and
Wanjiru Gekonyo, who's one of our co-hosts.
Wanjiru Gekonyo, yeah. Yes.
But
that was a very good case.
This brings the issue back to what I was saying, Daniel, earlier. It's the context. In the Kenyan context, and I also piggybacks on what Ndu is asking, forced innovation in leadership. If the people that you're leading are not woke, so to speak, or even alert to what they expect of you as a leader, then whatever you do, you may think that this is innovative. It's like saying that we shall expect to have an innovative leader just falling from the sky and not in the context of the fact that this person is coming from our community. This is who we are as a people. This is how we are handling COVID-19 as a people. So our leaders are basically leading us the way we are.
If you do not ask questions as a people, for example, you are in a constituency and you're not asking questions. You're not asking how much money is being allocated. How much money has been dispersed, how it's being used. It is your responsibility. There's a provision for public participation in county governance and also in some of these things. But you see, the people are not actually participating in public affairs. So Kenyans must start taking public participation seriously. If you do not engage in public participation, then the leaders will assume that you are not interested, and they will continue to make decisions, sometimes very bad decisions on your behalf.
Where does where is room made for things like agitation, if public participation? Because I think a lot of the things that we are told is, there was an email that was at the bottom of this. There was a meeting, there was a town hall, there was a baraza, there was this, that, the other thing. People didn't respond, or we wrote a letter, or you can go to court. So many things that you're told that you can do. Where is more succinct, more clear agitation then made room for in all of this?
I think Kenyans nowadays have resorted to agitating on social media, which has not been effective. An issue comes and it will trend for one day, and the hashtag trends, and after some time, people forget about it. And I think leaders have been used to it. So it will trend for a day or two, and then people will forget. I do not want to incite Kenyans, but what I want to say is that Kenyans must be informed. They must be able to understand that it is their responsibility to keep the leadership that they elected. They are the ones who elected this leadership. And they always say, as they say, you deserve the leaders that you elect. So once you elect a leadership, it is up to you to ensure that the leaders that you elect are actually doing the things, the manifestos that they promised you, is actually being implemented. So again, it is Kenyans. If Kenyans don't ask those questions, and especially opposition, right now I think we don't have a vibrant opposition because the opposition is basically cooperating with government. So the people who have to play opposition are the members of parliament, the legislators. They need to actually take that role. And I don't think they're doing it
What is
well
this
enough.
one thing you would do if you're MP today to change all these things we're talking about? One.
The one thing I would do,
I could ask for three, but I'm asking for one.
I would come up with a legislation that empowers the people, you know, and that, forces the leaders to be accountable. Accountability is
Precisely
what is
that.
lacking.
Our constitution does
Exactly.
exactly what you've just said.
Exactly. But in terms of implementation, Chapter 6 of the Constitution is very, very clear of what needs to be done. You know, we needed, enabling legislation to be able to operationalize the Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which was not done.
Daniel, we want to thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. Daniel Juma Omondi, he's the Executive Director of the Global Peace Foundation Kenya. Daniel, you're having a series of these conversations. You can just tell us about it as we wind up the conversation in about 30 seconds.
Thank you. Tomorrow we will be having a virtual conference, a Global Peace Leadership Conference. And I welcome those who have not registered to go and register at our website, globalpeace.org. We are having this, this virtual conference because of the coronavirus pandemic that has made it difficult for us to be able to meet physically. This conference is a demonstration of the resilience of the human beings, that even though there is a pandemic that we cannot meet face to face, we can still, thanks to the digital media and to the notion of the global village, we can still meet and discuss and be able to conduct business. So I'm calling it resilience amidst a pandemic.
Asante sana, Daniel, and have a good day. We wish you all the best in the conference tomorrow. We'll talk some more on leadership and especially innovative leadership. I think this is a conversation that cannot just end. It must continue.
Thank you so much.
Asante, have a good day. This is The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM and KTN Home. Time to take a quick break. We'll be back shortly. Just keep it right here.
"24/7 around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM.
Coming up to 8 o'clock, this is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Keep it right here because in the next hour, we will have more conversations. In the room is CT Muga Nduoko and Eric Latif. Remember, we are in Nairobi, 94.4, 87.9 in Mombasa, Kisumu, 102.5, Nakuru, 96.0, Eldoret, 96.7, 90.9 in Nyeri, 97.7 in Malindi. Good morning, 8 a.m.
Spice FM.
So, Uhuru Highway has officially been named a parking lot this morning. No traffic is moving. This is all the way from the Nyayo Stadium and it takes you all the way through to Westlands. Unfortunately, that's taking very long time to get through there. On Thika Road, you can use NIS Road through Muthaiga North and come out at Roasters, or through Kiambu Road and Coffee Garden, and then you find your way there ahead, because staying on Thika Road might take you a lot longer than it normally would. Okay. Visibility levels are still low in some parts, coming off of Limuru Road, passing the village market and then getting into the CBD from there, or then going right to Westlands. You will be fine for most parts, but then it gets a little bit slower as you approach the turnoff there, either to the CBD or going towards Westlands and joining with Forest Road. Apart from that, it looks good. Unfortunately, there's a pole that has fallen on Gong Road this morning, an electricity pole. Kenya Power is being asked to come and sort that out, but it is affecting traffic at the moment and vehicles are having to use one lane for both directions. So that's going to cause a bit of a nightmare that we hope to wake up from soon enough. SpiceFemKE, that's how you can reach us on Twitter. Let us know where else there might be a problem and we can share the word, or at least get somebody to get there and do something about it. But for now, it doesn't look too bad except for where it is. Let us know on Twitter.
All right, coming up to 3 minutes after 8 o'clock. The conversation continues. In the room, we have Mwalimu CT Muga taking us to
This is the
class now.
Situation Room,
The calculations
the home
of political
hard-hitting
arithmetic.
political commentary and
before
penetrating
you do that,
insights
Steve,
about the state of the
let's tell us
nation.
today's
This
proverb.
is a talk radio
If you have
experience
an
like
argument
no.
with a fool, should it happen that you find yourself in such a position, as they say in colloquial Kenyan English, be knowing. Let it be known to you, he will win.
Ka ukijua.
Yes,
Okay.
he will win.
All right. Okay.
The thing about maths that makes it interesting is, well, to begin with, most people assume that maths is actually a science subject. It isn't. Maths is actually part of philosophy. It falls under the subset of logic, which actually is philosophy. Now, when you have a mathematical problem, the thing that you are urged to do is to understand the formula which will be provided to unravel it. Here's the problem. The formula you use for such a problem is this, and if you use it correctly, then you will be able to arrive at some possible solution. The stalemate that we've had within our Senate falls into that very same category. You have a problem, you have a formula, and the holders of that formula are called the CRA, Commission on Revenue Allocation. They came up with a formula, and for one reason or the other, this formula wasn't working to solve this arithmetic problem. And the reason why it wasn't solving it was because of the calculations. Individual senators, groups of senators, individual interests, groups of interests come together, and then you throw into the basket historical narratives and historical interests. And you have a situation where there are so many variables that you cannot arrive at one possible solution because people are pulling from all sorts of direction. Now, there's one gentleman who is known by many called Einstein. He tried to do this by coming up with something called a unified field theory. What a unified field theory, especially in physics, tries to do, it tries to describe and to understand all the fundamental forces and relationships between the elementary particles in terms of one theoretical framework. So, what is the reality of the political framework that our leaders needed to perhaps consider in order to come up with one unified field theory that could provide us with a solution to move forward with this division of spoils that has been at the center of discussion. You know, many people think this thing has been going on for the last month. No. This issue has been a debate for well over a year. It didn't start yesterday, but it's only now that it's in the public domain. Anytime you find yourself in a situation such as this one, and statements are made that appear to have a tribal tinge to it, statements are made that have a historical element to it, and by historical I mean someone says, you throw the word in marginalization, it's historical. You say certain things and you throw in the BBI, it's considered tribal. But if you look at the statements that have followed, they've been conciliatory. People considering the others and saying, no, let us look at something that can benefit everyone, something that we can at least agree on. That's a unified field theory. But what it means is you must learn to understand that in order to get, sometimes you actually have to give. And not from your perspective of what you think the person needs, but from the perspective of the other person, what they actually need. And they probably are telling you. Now, here we are today. Have we arrived at a unified field theory?
Nope.
Precisely. Can we arrive at it? Yes. What must we do? This should be the subject of our debate today. What must we give? What must we take? What must we give up?
The conversation has taken a political side altogether, moved away from the formula per se, right?
Yes, it has.
So, yes, the formula is there. We're discussing formula, but there's the issue of, so do we delay the implementation date of this formula? That means that we have adopted the formula. Or do we change the formula altogether? Do we reject this formula and just adopt the previous formula and roll it over?
No.
I think what I read when I see this debate going on in the Senate is the politicians being... okay, let me not use those words. So the politicians are basically just not being honest. Okay? And they are not raising the issue against or for or against the formula that has been presented by the experts at the CRA. Because remember, the people who came up with this formula are not just people who...
It's not the people who are arguing for it.
It's not the people who are arguing. The people who came up with this formula are experts who are mandated to come up with a formula. And they came up with a formula and they said, let's look at the parameters. And they have justification for coming up with these parameters. The argument is not on the parameters per se. The argument is on everything else. The implications of the parameters. So if we were saying that yesterday's debate, for example, that reached another deadlock and there was postponement, was because people were arguing against this parameter getting 20% or 17% and saying, let's reduce this parameter because it would have an impact on this county this way, and the other county would also benefit in this other manner, then that would be something. I don't hear those debates. So you're asking, are we going to get to that level? We'll get to that level where people are going to be either they are going to be herded into one corner.
Are our senators capable of being honest?
Look here, if what you've just said now, right, is what is being considered, there's a formula which was created by individuals who are mandated to create this formula. That is their job. And say that we have looked at everything. We've looked at across demography. We've looked across geography. We've looked across everything. And taking all things into consideration, this is what we have been able to come up with that will now then be applicable to counties. Once you throw in anything else that you don't use the facets of the formula to argue, it can only be seen that you're then throwing in personal sentiment, emotion, or politics. That's it. Unfortunately, I have not seen in the many arguments that have come out, in the different sides that we've seen, which would be between one senator and another, I've not seen that the merits of the formula have then been put on the table for argument. I haven't. Now, if we had, then you'd be able to say, all right, this is a healthy, robust debate. I find fault with this element of the formula. Can it be tweaked a little bit? If that was the argument that was being had, then I would say that then this argument is not baseless. But until and unless such a kind of argument comes to the table, for me, this hullabaloo, the circus that we're seeing playing out on the floor, is just that. It's a circus, unfortunately. It has political tinge to it, and it just means that people are trying to align themselves for the future, unfortunately. And when we say that, yes, people suffer, that's what happens at the end of the day. That people continue to suffer and things about development are actually not brought to the fore.
You see, the moment historical perspectives become or are presented as the reality that people are then discussing, you've actually moved and you're discussing something else. And yet, those historical perspectives are based on reality. The reality may not be fully represented with the present, but they're there, and you cannot throw it away and assume that the perspectives being presented should just be shunted aside. No. That's their perspective. That's the perspective of their people. How do you change that perspective? How do you ensure that they see, fine, history, correct. However, now, this is what's being done. How do you do that? And how does it become realistic? See, that's where Eric's statements about the dishonesty comes in. Because if you take the historical perspective that we have of our politicians, that these people always looked after, number one, themselves, then something has to give to make us think, no. In this instance, they're actually not focusing on what benefits them directly. And yet, as politicians, they must. And they must present it as something that's going to represent and benefit their people.
They must present it as that in order for it to at least have some semblance of passage. But in terms of the true picture, the people for whom it should, the individuals, the people for whom it should actually present some kind of benefit is the people. It's the citizenry. To say that those that we have been given custodial ownership, as it were, over are actually benefiting from something like this. CT, you brought in the philosophical aspect of all of this, and you talked about formula and all of that, and what people in history have done with mathematics. Why do they do that? Because you see something in your reality, and you need to have something that would be able to explain it, no matter the weather, no matter time, no matter the individuals that were playing with this. Right?
Yes.
So it needed to stand the test of time. It needed to stand the test of change. It needed to stand the test of individuals who came in. And that's what it is. That a formula, regardless of what happened, whether more people were born, whether more people died, whether there was rain, famine, or fire, this formula would then be able to benefit people per county. And that's why you have a formula in the first place. Why do you still talk about E equals MC squared until today? Because it has stood the test of time. Einstein would have been thousands of years old, but what did he do? You look at what is before you and then you use that to base your decision. That is not being done now. It is not. And really, I think we need to be able to lift these political scales off our eyes and be able to see that what is being played out here actually really is not what should be the center of attention.
What makes it worse, Ndu, is this: perspectives that are aired and are made to be representative of certain political voices, unfortunately are representative of communities. A leader says something. This is the leader, one individual saying it. That statement is now going to be taken the moment it gets political, and it becomes a community statement, and yet it is one person who said it.
Because it becomes CT said it, and it's the people of Muhoroni who believe this.
Precisely.
Right.
If you make a decision, and this one is something that I mention from time to time, and there may be logic to it, it may be sound, but an entire economy is affected. I'm talking about, say, the SGR and moving certain functions that were previously at the port to, say, Naivasha. Economically, you may even argue it out and prove that it is good, it is the right thing to do. However, you have 4 counties whose entire economy is actually based on maritime. Now, perspective here, will not see it in that light. They will see it that their livelihood has been taken away. And how do you then form your discussion so that they understand that this is not the case? So when the representatives enter this discussion, they come with that perspective. And they're not going to budge. You can speak until you sweat blood through your eyelids with the soundest logic. That perspective which they came with is what's going to hold sway. How do you move them from that? Because that perspective for them is their reality.
But this brings in that issue that we were discussing in the previous hour, the point of innovative leadership in terms of crisis, times like this. It's when do you sit back, become honest with yourself? Because I was listening, for example, to the discussion in the Senate yesterday, and speaker after speaker would stand up and say, look, we all know that the issue here is because we are talking about 316 billion, which is compared to 316 billion that was received last year. No county would sit back and say, all right, so last year we received X amount. This year we're going to receive X minus 1.9 billion shillings, right? That's not going to be an easy conversation.
No.
Ideally, we should have moved from 316 billion to 316 plus X billion.
Yes.
And then now this formula would have shown, well, we are still receiving what we received last year, not necessarily explain to the people that you have received less. Okay? Now, that's what they were saying. For many times when we come to this Senate, we try to argue for an increase to the allocation of money to the counties. In a 3 trillion shilling budget, only 316 billion shillings is going to the county governments. This is an argument that we've tried to raise many times in this house as senators, and yet when governors go and sit and discuss these things with IBEC, which is governors and the national government, they agree on 316 billion. So they try to shift blame and say, you know what, it's governors who accepted this. But now here we are. We are not going to accept anything that removes money from the pocket of county governments from what they received last year. This is why I'm bringing the issue of the dishonesty. The honest bit of it would be, look, reality is we've had one formula. This formula was changed. We had the second formula. This formula has been changed. We have a third formula. And the third formula is changing the parameters because of the justifications that have been brought before us by the experts at the Committee on Revenue Allocation. If you have misgivings about the thinking by the committee, the Commission for Revenue Allocation, you should be discussing this with the Commission and saying, no,
take it up with them.
Come, Commission, let's argue back and forth until you guys go and bring us another proposed formula.
And how long have we had time to discuss this thing?
This happened already. The discussions between the Senate and the CRA happened.
Yes.
And that is why this thing has come to the
floor of the
floor of
Senate.
Senate. Question is the honesty and the dishonesty of our senators and our politicians, and the capability of our leaders to make those tough decisions when it counts. Make those tough decisions and say, so this is where we are right now, and this is what we need to do. And not just the Senate, but also the governors and the national executive. These are conversations that they should be having. Now, we are not having that conversation. And that's where
That's why you've gone to 6
calculation of political arithmetic comes in. The calculation here is not about the formula, what it matters. It's what suits me in my position as a politician today and looking ahead just 2 years from now.
17 months.
Yeah.
And this is what we're saying, that it can change. It's one thing today, and it will be easily something tomorrow. And why this is a problem, Matt, is that, Eric, for every individual that comes in, for every government administration that comes in, you have individuals that are going to hold sway regardless. So this then could change. It could change tomorrow because, you know what, this doesn't suit me. And maybe I have some kind of political sway, so I'm going to make as much noise as I can. And I'm going to lobby as many people to come on my side as we can, because that's what we're seeing here. The filibustering that we are seeing is at epic proportions right now because people are looking for some kind of positioning for 2022. It is clear, it's evident. Because you don't know what position you're going to be in the next time. But you know for sure that you would like to be aligned now. Which is why I'm saying, if you had something that was going to go along with the mathematics, then you forget about all this drama in between. You can make noise as much as you want to make, but we know that when it comes to allocation of funds for counties to be able to run, this is what it is going to follow. So all this drama, take it somewhere else.
That drama can't really go anywhere. But before I continue, let me correct myself. 5 counties of the coast, not 4, 5. Mm-hmm. You see, the drama is the politics. And the politics is the drama. All these things that we're saying, unfortunately, have come to a head. Looking at 2022, looking at what I think will benefit me, but which I will present as being of benefit to the community.
Everybody.
Yes, okay. Looking at then my just personal interest of what I stand to gain should ABCD happen. All these things come into play. Now, that's where the dishonesty that Eric talks about, that's where the dishonesty has to be discussed. Because in all honesty, you want to have this discussion among yourselves when you know very well that this is something that affects the livelihood of all the 40, how many are we?
7
million people in the country. All. Remember, this particular discussion, if agreed upon, is to carry on for 5 years. Isn't it? Mm-hmm. Now, 5 years is a long time.
It is.
So when one looks at 5 years, when one looks at political aspirations, when one looks at all these things that politicians look at, you know, there's a thinking here that many of these so-called developed countries arrived at early. They used to think like us as well. Yes, they do. The advantage class. Remember, let me give an example of Russia. You had the emperor, king, whatever you called him.
So,
yeah, the nobility served him. The serfs, who were essentially enslaved, served the nobility. So that's how it worked. So now, when the serfs were emancipated, there was a little problem here. How do we then get things done? Because things were done by other people. All right? Now, they've done an roundabout. A revolution needed to happen in Russia for them to realize that actually, it is actually in your interest to look after the interests of these people who are formerly serfs. Then your interest is taken care of. Somehow, our politicians haven't understood that looking after the welfare of the Mwananchi is the best way of looking after their own interest, not the high walls and the security officers.
If you're looking for a leg up, you've got to look down.
Yes.
Because that's it, basically.
Yes. It hasn't hit them yet. All this running around and doing all these things, if the focus was, in all honesty, now honesty, how can we ensure our citizens really genuinely benefit and ensure that those who do not do what they're supposed to do are called to book? The security we speak of, the safety we speak of, the well-being we speak of, will be on the right path to achieving it. Because the interest of the person who best needs it will have been taken care of. Why do you think the West have the sort of so-called democracy that they have? That interest of the common Mwananchi is actually looked after.
There are problems.
And you can see it.
You can see it.
And COVID has shown us this.
So you get to the place whereby somebody's issue is not food. Somebody's issue is not whether the roads work or not. Somebody's issue is not whether there are good schools or good hospitals or, you know, a welfare system so that if you don't have food, there's somewhere you can go. There's somewhere you can go and sleep if you don't have a place to go. That's not your problem.
No.
So by the time somebody is coming and asking something else of you, guess what? Your basic needs are already taken care of, and you can actually have time for things like agitation and lobbying and ask them to do other things, which other countries, by the way, have not even dreamed of, because people are still buried in that search for looking for your basics. We keep asking ourselves the question here, for example, why was it so easy for China to be able to tell an entire population of 1 billion people what to do, and they all fell in line? Why was it so easy for them to do that? Their problem is not whether they're going to be looking for food or whether there's a pothole in the middle of the road that they don't, or whether they're going to be able to get their produce from farm to market. That's not their issue, because all of that has been taken care of.
Yeah.
You've shown the people what the priority is. You followed that priority, and you've shown them time and time and time without number that you're actually able to do this thing. So by the time they look at you and you're agitating for other things in the public sphere, they don't question you. They don't think that possibly you're being dishonest.
No, that doesn't actually feature.
It actually doesn't feature
because
at
they know
all.
that
It's
if you are
something else.
dishonest, they know exactly what will happen
The
to you.
repercussions are clear
Yes.
of what it's going to be. In this case, it's like a circus, and we look and we say, senators are clamoring for a formula or clamoring for how money is going to be, but we sit and we think, okay, this is interesting. It's drama. Somebody could be lying. Somebody could be aligning themselves. Somebody could be positioning themselves for public office. Can you imagine? There's some countries where that would never even come into the
You know what
imaginations
makes
of
it worse
people.
and do? We are focusing on the senators. MCAs don't think any differently.
They don't.
MPs don't think any differently. They don't. You may think that the MCAs represent maybe some that is what you call a ward.
Them, they think they're
but they're
the
client
voice of
issues.
the people.
You take it a little higher, it's the same thing. So the dishonesty is being represented here among the political class by the senators. But you find the same dishonesty among the members of parliament. You find the same dishonesty among the MCAs. Same dishonesty. That's why when they clamor for something like an impeachment, you actually ask, what didn't they get that they actually want?
Your first
First thought
will be
before you even read and understand that actually, hey, this guy is
Merit,
actually have some
something
political
here.
complaint here.
Yeah.
Yes. No, your first thought is, okay, which benchmarking trip did they not go to?
Or where do they want to go?
Yes.
Or what do
Or which
they want
allowance
to
has
do?
not been paid. That's what you think of. And why? Because historically, we have seen this demonstrated over and over again, very, very equitably throughout the country. It's a problem you see in almost every county. So, this is the same person who's going to want to be an MP. What makes you think that somehow he will have a road to Damascus experience and he'll be a changed person? Same person, bigger portfolio, more money. The person becomes senator, same person. Now, they'll have acquired a godlike complex. You can't even tell them that they're wrong. Because as far as they're concerned, how can they possibly be? And they're in that position.
You put them there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
Even
you
worse,
knew.
even
Because
worse,
you knew.
you put them there.
But there's an underbelly here that perhaps needs to be asked. And it came up when we were discussing this with Mr. Juma Mondi. Are the people we have in positions of authority right now really capable of managing the problems we have?
Before you even want to talk about innovative leadership.
No. That's pushing it to the next level.
Yeah.
Yes, basic
Start the
level.
basic problems solving.
Are they capable of addressing our current?
Yes,
Address
current.
the
Are they
current
capable?
problem
Yes.
Before you even start going towards innovation
You
and
know,
reform.
Eric, we may be actually accusing people wrongly. We may be assuming that these people have the ability to do these things we're saying, and actually they don't.
It's assuming a fish can climb a tree.
My friend, that is the correct thing.
Okay. Let's take a break. This is a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation on Spice FM and KTN Home. We are talking about calculations of political arithmetic. That is what Mwalimu C.T. Muga is raising this morning, looking at our political class and what inspires them, not influences, what inspires them to make the decisions that they make. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back shortly. Keep it right here.
It's warming up in Nairobi at 15 degrees. We'll see highs of 22 and lows of 12 today. Also then looking into Nyeri, 14 degrees and mostly cloudy, highs of 21 with rains expected in the afternoon. Nakuru at 14 degrees is mostly cloudy, highs of 22 and lows of 12 with rain expected later. In Eldoret today, it's mostly cloudy, right now at 14 degrees. Thunderstorms are forecasted for later. We'll see highs of 18 and lows of 11. In Kisumu, it's mostly cloudy at 19 degrees, highs of 26 and lows of 18 with rains expected later in the afternoon. Kakamega is partly cloudy at 18 degrees, highs of 23 and lows of 14 with thunderstorms expected later. In Mombasa, it's partly cloudy at 24 degrees, highs of 29 and lows of 23 with rain showers forecasted in the afternoon. It's also likely to be a wet afternoon as it is a wet morning in Malindi. Light rain showers rule the morning, highs of 28 and lows of 24 today. In Kampala, it's partly cloudy at 19, highs of 24 and lows of 18. Partly cloudy conditions to go on through today. In Dar es Salaam at 24 degrees, we'll see highs of 31 today and lows of 23. Johannesburg is mostly sunny at 5 degrees. It'll go to a high of 18 today and come down to lows of 4. And finally, for now, in Lagos, it's 23 degrees and partly cloudy. It'll be rains later with highs of 29 and lows of 23. Let's look at what the roads look like at the moment. Mombasa Road is not looking too terrible right now. Uhuru Highway still very, very slow today coming off of Mombasa Road and also coming out of Westlands. We're likely to see this is going to take some time to be able to get out of. And other parts of the city, let's look at Thika Road. You can use the service lanes because the main highway is quite clogged as far back as Safari Park, but you can use the inner roads and come out at Kiambu Road and then find your way into the city from the Pangani underpass. Apart from that, it looks fine, guys. Not too much, except for Mombasa Road, where we see some issues right around Cabanas, but it'll open up later. The Eastern and Southern bypass is open for use, not having much problems there right now. Spice FM KE is how you can reach us on Twitter.
Traffic.
28 minutes to 9 o'clock. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. The Situation Room, broadcasting on Spice FM and KTN Home, as well as live streaming on our digital platforms, Spice FM, KE, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, and www.spicefm.co.ke. In the room this and every morning, my name is Eric Latif. We have Ndu Oko and CT Muga. And CT is raising the topic this morning of calculations of political arithmetic, pegging this on what we've seen in the Senate. 6 times they have gone to the floor of the House and they have been unable to reach consensus on adopting a formula or any variation of that formula. And this is affecting how much money is going to be distributed, allocated to counties. But also moving even outside the Senate itself to other levels of leadership. The National Executive, the County Executive, the National Assembly, the County Assemblies, all leaders. You're asking the question whether they have the capacity to address our current need.
I am asking this question because when we first began broadcasting and talking about COVID, we likened it to a war, a battle. And a battle has one wonderful quality about it, if there can be such a thing as a wonderful quality in a battle. It brings out leaders who are battle ready. If we're talking about the level of a general, it tells you who a wartime general is and what a peacetime general is. Now, in this war, if you look at the generals whom we have, and these are the leaders that we have, would we say that they have shown us without any doubt their capacity to actually fight and win this battle? The answer would be, from my perspective, a resounding no.
The battle being COVID-19.
It's just COVID. Because everything we talk about, whether it is the managing of the funds, the underbelly of what is actually happening, showing us a true picture, all these things have been brought into being by COVID.
What parameters are you using to judge them?
Well, I'm judging it by what it is that is anticipated and expected would be received by the large population of Kenya and those who perhaps don't have the means to look after themselves against what is available and against what has been given. There's a disparity there, and a huge one. Because there are promises that are made which are based on budgets and calculations that have been done by the responsible bodies called the governments, the various governments, whether it's national, whether it's county, and yet the delivery has fallen short of what has, and this is continuously so. So it raises the question. We may be thinking that these people are other things, and yet they may have been given a task that is beyond them. They actually can't do it. It doesn't matter how many times you repeat it, they can't do it.
But also we run the risk, City, as we continue this conversation, of lumping everybody into the same basket, or just throwing everybody in the same basket.
It's deliberate.
Do we need to look at them individually? Maybe there are those that stand out.
I'm actually doing this deliberately for this simple reason. The functions are tied together. There's no independent. You have a treasury that supposedly has the money and makes decisions on how this should be disbursed. You have a body that's supposed to have oversight. They're all tied in. And all these things relate to one group of individuals they're called the citizenry.
Yep.
So if the end result, who's the citizenry, doesn't receive, all these activities are supposed to end up having the citizen benefiting. If it doesn't happen, then I have to lump everybody. And then after lumping them, then I can ask, okay, who has done what they're supposed to do?
Does somebody get 8 out of 10, for instance?
Yes, you
For
can't get
efforts?
8 out of 10 when we start looking at what was required of you and have you done it. If you have, then we give you the appropriate marks.
Yeah. Because you've got
Because
to
the
look,
functions are different.
and you've got to look at the context of, so these are the difficult circumstances that you're in. So you're saying maybe you're a governor and you are talking about the financial constraints that you have. You're talking about the distance that you have. You're talking about the population that you need to take care of. You're also talking about the prevalence of this COVID-19 in your region and what you need to do immediately. So if we look at all that, then we start seeing some differences. There are some leaders that we could say are capable of addressing our current needs, and then those that we could say not so much.
You know, when you break down the leadership, say to the county level and break it down even further to the ward level, you then realize that those who, the crafters of our constitution, thought this thing through. They really did. And they wanted to make sure that there was an even playing field. That's why you have direct interventions of what you may call affirmative action within the Constitution that tries to ensure that people who might otherwise historically have been disadvantaged are brought to a point where at least certain things are righted. Not that everything is resolved, no. But at least those steps are taken. But despite that, 7 years down the line, we're having this discussion, which is very similar to the discussion you should have 1 year after this was implemented. Why are we having the same discussion? That's why
we're stuck right there.
Yes, and the reason I'm saying is perhaps, you see, we didn't have COVID. The problems persisted. There were complaints more than there were accolades. And we said, Kenyans like complaining. They do. Yeah. But some of the things they're complaining about were real. In fact, a good portion of them were. Then COVID comes along and the whole thing goes belly up and you're wondering, goodness gracious me, what do we do? And yet, Eric, the worst thing about it, we haven't seen the worst yet. We haven't seen the worst of COVID, and we're heading there. That is what is truly tragic and truly alarming. So, if this is what we see of the leadership now, when we haven't seen the worst,
when it would appear that you still have a handle on things,
yes,
right?
So I have to
ask. It would appear that things are not so terrible, and it looks as if things are bad when it comes to how it's all being handled. Then you must ask yourself, if in fact things do get worse, what then would it look like in the coming years?
It's a doomsday scenario.
Sure. In the coming years, we're going to have to deal with something as sensitive and as, all-encompassing as an election, for example, when the country must continue running, where there could be the presence of something else in the future. How then is it going to work? When you have to look at leadership and you have to continue to look at, we're asking this of your people. It could be something worse. It could be something worse than COVID tomorrow. But are we making decisions with all of that taken into consideration? Look, they're not hiding this behavior. Leaders are not hiding this behavior from you. Leaders are not hiding the behavior from the populace. It's not like they're going to some corner somewhere. All of this that's being done is put in the public sphere. Everything that's being said, every sentiment that is being intimated is put out there in the public for you to see and for you to hear. But it is unfortunate that the decisions that are being made are still being made regardless of how they're showing you what it is that they really feel. Who'd have thought that when it comes to money being released from the National Treasury, of how individuals and citizens are going to get their wherewithal, how they're going to be able to survive, how the development index in the country is going to rise step by step forever how long, is going to be put at the altar of political alignment.
Or political expediency.
And that's where it's being
Who'd
laid.
have thought?
Look
when
at the
you talk
question-
about your livelihood
Look at
being
the question
sacrificed.
look at the question that Eric raised about honesty. I feel it is, or should I say dishonesty. Consider. Here you have a situation where we're not discussing problems that we don't know or understand. We do. Okay? But it appears that the relationship between the citizenry and the leadership is something the leadership doesn't consider to be important. Why do I say this? We had a Safaricom senior executive with us on the phone, and we talked about and telling them about the smartphone. You remember? Have they not rolled that particular program on today at 20 bob a day? Why do you then think that people trust Safaricom? Why then do you think that people trust the products that Safaricom produces? You know, when they say they deliver,
They said they were going
and
to
it's
do something.
consistent, so you feel, oh, Safaricom. You don't even think twice why they've developed a relationship. But if you look at the relationship that our leadership, political and otherwise, have developed, case in point, what has prevented the Treasury from releasing money, which the Supreme Court said they were allowed to release, even in a situation such as the one we're in? Why has that money not been released?
This one is not even about the Supreme Court. We are talking about money that should have gone to the counties in
Anyway,
June.
Thank you, my brother.
In the previous financial year.
Thank you. Why has it not gone?
It hasn't gone. So this is not about whether the law formula has been passed or not.
No.
Counties have not received the full allocation of the money that they should have received in the previous financial year.
Now, you see why.
We're in a new financial year.
Yes. Eric, you see why I lump them together?
Into-
Because the dishonesty cuts through. Why has that money not been given? Is it a really complicated thing to answer? So you have to, that's where the question comes in. Are we in a situation where we are expecting something that will never happen because these people who currently are in leadership really cannot manage these things? They are not. It's not that they are bad people. They can't. They don't have the ability. They're actually not capable.
So then comes the question then, what is supposed to happen? Because if you look at what you want to call maybe more mature administrations, what would they do in that case? It's not
Honesty-
a question. It's not a question. What do
No.
we talk about? Even if there is the whiff of dishonesty in other democracies or whatever you want to call it, there's a whiff. You're out.
Honesty means you look at a situation and the task before you and you say, you know, this one, please, forgive me, this one I'm not able to do.
I can't do this.
This one I'm actually not able to do. So I would urge that we find someone else who can do it, because I'm doing what I can, but I actually can't meet the requirements.
Or honesty on the other side is actually saying, you know what? Actually, this formula is really not so bad. Right? Let the thing sail through, let the money go to counties, and we sort out our political tiff on another level. Honesty also means that this thing is actually not so bad. That maybe we got more money last year, maybe we're getting less, maybe we get less and then we get more and we're actually happy with it. But at the end of the day, once you look at the country collectively, everybody's benefiting.
The issue
We
is
know
you
for
do
a
not
fact-
want to receive less than you received last year, which
Of
makes
course.
sense.
That's fine.
Perfect,
Nobody
eh?
does.
Now,
If you
come
want-
up with a solution that cushions
That
that, but
cushions
says, okay, so this is a formula, we take the formula, but how are we going to ensure that we do not nobody receives less money than they
And you
But
can
are
come
they
up with that
offering
formula
Yeah.
if you want to.
But
and
are
you
they
can.
offering? But are they offering that solution? No.
Well, you see the dishonesty you speak of,
That's
here's
it.
it said again.
Yes.
The solution that is being
Okay, not the
proposed
solution.
here
Are they
is
even offering an option?
the solution that is being proposed here is let's push the date.
That's not a
No.
solution.
No.
It's
Kick the
kicking
can
down
down
the
the
road.
road.
No,
It's
no,
not
no,
an
no,
option.
somebody
It's
else
not a
pick it.
solution.
That's a cop out.
Whereas they could say clearly, this is what we are going to adopt this, but we need to go back to the IBEC and how much we are agreeing to allocate as counties, 316 billion, or we shall increase money. We shall include a rider in this law or look for other mechanisms of including
There are
a rider.
mechanisms you can look
and
into.
saying 1.9 billion shillings shall not go through this county allocation to Wajir or Garissa
Because
or
we have
Mandera,
a ceiling on it,
because
yes.
already there's a ceiling, but there shall be an extra 1.9 billion shillings that shall go to Wajir, Garissa. Have that conversation. you cannot, run around. You know where the problem is. You know your problem is because the National Treasury may not have that money. Tell them, you go find the money. My job, as far as I'm concerned as a legislator, is I have said, formula by CRA makes sense.
You see,
the clamor by these counties not to lose a shilling makes a lot of sense. And this is what I have decided. You as a national government, go find the money.
You see, dishonesty is pretending that the citizenry are not suffering. That's dishonesty. Dishonesty is behaving and believing that there aren't certain parts of this country that were hugely disadvantaged. That's dishonesty. Honesty is saying, look, this is the reality. Can we address them realistically? Not throw a general thing and say this, realistically. What do we do? That's honesty. And then, Eric, back to you. It appears that our leaders are not capable of being honest. They're simply not capable
of being
it
honest.
was that they couldn't do the job, and then it has gone to something else.
Well,
that really
if
can't
we're hearing the same
that you
story
can't
that they've been
legislate
telling us,
for.
and we've determined that what they're telling us is not true, what are they telling you? That they're not capable of actually telling you the truth.
Are we capable?
Are
we capable of being
we
honest?
the citizenry?
Yes.
We are capable of understanding that we are suffering, and we're also capable of keeping quiet about it.
Because I'm thinking, if we were capable of being honest, then we'd tell them.
Through what forum would we tell them? Eric?
Whatever forum we have.
Wherever
we have
you
very many
meet
forums.
them,
We
whatever
have very
forum you
many
meet them
fora
with.
of engaging with the leaders. They would know clearly that this is what we think. And that may spark them to action.
There are
For as long as they play dishonest, and then we appear as if we are not understanding that
we
they're
are,
being
we are
dishonest.
passively acquiescing to what they're doing.
Yes.
Why the leadership is the point at which I am stuck is this. They may have been, and they were, and they still exist, injustices. But the truth of the matter is, if you look deep, it boils down to the one thing we always discuss here, leadership. Some people have been in leadership, and you ask, what on earth did they do? And yet what they could have done, I'm going to give an example of the coast. There was a gentleman called Tuva, MP for Malindi for the longest time. When this man was MP, he even became an assistant minister. There's something that Tuva did. Tuva got his people to actually get to a point, form a circle and even own shares in a beach hotel. Took it further, own shares in the cashew nut factory in Kilifi. I'm talking about the previous century. I'm talking about the 1980s and earlier. That's how far back. They even had public transport that his people had shares in. You have had forward-looking leaders who have brought their communities to think that way. There was Gema. What do you think it was? It was a commercial enterprise. They had understood the power of pulling together. There was Lua Thrift. Again, people who had seen way beyond other leaders.
Far.
Now, what am I trying to say? That in those same areas, you'll find leaders who never thought along those lines. And so what we ended up doing was taking steps backwards as opposed to forward. And all manner of things that could possibly go wrong went completely wrong. Now, the maintenance of the status quo in the thinking of the leadership, believing that they have impunity and they can get away with everything, has persisted. This wonderful thing called devolution has manifested this particular principle more than any other. Actual money is given. We know so-and-so received this, so-and-so. We know what they received. And yet the debate that we keep having is they want more money. And the question that, if we are to be honest, we must ask, please tell us what you did with the one you received before. Please.
If they were to be honest, they would answer and show you the timeline of the projects that they actually then invested in. If they were to apply this same level of honesty that you're talking about, if the question were to be asked, they would also tell you. And I don't think you can hide a building. I don't think you can hide a road. I don't think you can hide an entire school.
And
You'd be able to show people this is actually what we did. These are the projects that we've been able to invest in county by county, or, for your county. As a leader, or at least what you've been able to legislate for, what you've been able to oversight, to say that, okay, this is actually what has happened. And based on this, I would like to continue, or I would like to now put my energies and funds somewhere else. And I think that's good justification to be able to get more.
You know,
If we are living in, a
you
real
would
situation.
think that a good idea would be picked up and others would follow and build on it. You would think.
But that's what development does. That's what development does. Development by its nature begets more development.
Ours and our politics, it kills it.
Whether it's the development of ideas or whether it's the actual hands-on development of infrastructure, development begets development. If you want to see the development of an idea, it would be picked up by somebody else and picked up by yet another. But we never actually let this thing deliver. You carry it and then it's aborted along the line somewhere.
You know the simple principle on investing in your people, what we call a human resource, and it in turn giving you a huge returns in terms of what it is that they're able to do, because essentially you are enabling your population to bring out the best. We have a system that ensures that you stifle that very same thing. You talk about it, talk about bringing it forward, but you stifle it. So, here we are.
When you talk about this honesty, let's also shine a spotlight on the national government.
Let's please.
Because when you talk about a budget of 3 trillion shillings and only 360 billion goes to counties, the rest of that money, 250 something billion, goes to the national government. What is the national government doing with all that money? What have they done?
Besides paying debts.
Why should the national government continue keeping all that money and only a trickle going to the counties? If you were a resident of Makueni County, for example, and you were able to give your governor, let's assume that the people of Makueni County are happy with their governor, they give their governor a pass mark. Okay?
Yes.
Just out of 10, let's say they've given him 60%. And they would say that this we have seen in the last 7 years. We've seen the kind of development that has come to this area in the last 7 years because of devolution. Now, the national government, in those 7 years, what have you done? For the people of Makueni County, for the people of Mombasa, of Isiolo, of whichever county, Nandi, Uasin Gishu, pick. What is it that the national government has done so that we say that the whole discussion that we are pointing out here is, justify what you've done with the 360 that you've been receiving, justify. The national government should also be justifying what it's been doing with the money that it keeps.
It should. In fact, the question that one should even ask further, why do we keep budgeting with money we don't have?
Starting from there.
Yes, why? We know what we can collect. We know what we have. Why do we keep budgeting with money that we don't have? Why then do we keep planning and trying to implement projects using money we don't have? What stops us, honesty, from simply saying, we can't afford to do this, so let's not do it?
Yep. We are able to collect 1.6 trillion shillings.
That's what we're going to be.
1.4.
Yes.
1.4 trillion shillings is what we are able to collect now. All right?
So let's see what we can do with
Let's
this
work with 1.4 trillion. Out of this 1.4 trillion, we have given the counties 360 billion, and then we are left with 1.1.
Yes.
And out of this 1.1, 900 goes to pay debts.
So then we remain with 2. Now let's figure out how we're going to run the government with this.
Yes.
There have been times when governments have been able to cut their coat according to their cloth. So it's not something that's a far cry from reality. It has been done before. It can be done again. And I think that, really the reins on responsibility have really been let loose. And that's why it's all right, where you should be having a national debate on how funds are going to go towards the development of the people, then it has been turned into a circus. Because of the relaxation on this reins of responsibility, that's why you have something like this going on, where you say that we should have funds and we should be able to sort ourselves. Government should be able to sort themselves out. Well, you don't run into this drama, but it doesn't happen.
Yep.
It doesn't happen.
Which is why I shine the spotlight back to the Senate, the National Assembly, and the Council of Governors. This whole discussion we're having, the standoff about the revenue allocation formula, we should not be having this discussion because by this time we should have had a conversation on why does the national government need to keep so much money? How much money should be going to the county governments? This conversation should have happened a long time ago.
Precisely, because to increase money, essentially, is to actualize devolution.
Yep.
Because the moment you actualize devolution, it means the functions go to the counties. And for the functions to go to the counties, you have to supply the money to ensure that the functions are enacted.
Thank you very much for tuning in to the Situation Room today on KTN Home. We have been here with you on KTN Home since 7 a.m. This conversation continues on Spice FM. We broadcast from Nairobi, 94.4. We are in Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, and Malindi. And as we're coming up to 9 o'clock, We'll have a different conversation at 9, where we will be looking at what's happening in terms of the fight against COVID in the region. We'll be talking to a journalist who has done a very good story on BBC on what's happening in Somalia. Just keep it right here for that conversation. And then we'll also look at the other countries in the region, what's happening, and also in this country of ours. How are we dealing with COVID-19? So this is a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Our audience on KTN Home. Asante sana. And see you again next week. Good morning. It's 5 minutes to 9 o'clock.
Kenya's biggest conversation. You're in the Situation Room this morning. We'll be looking at several issues as we discuss some of these things and ask ourselves the question how important it is to really be aware of what is going on with leadership. And so that it's at this point that I'm going to ask the difficult questions. It's at this point that I'm going to demand honesty. It's at this point that I'm going to say, you know what, we know what's going on. But I think those questions can only be brought forth when they're informed by fact, by information. Even as citizens, because we've thrown it quite hard and heavy to leaders. As citizens also, are we aware of what's supposed to be happening? How many of us are aware of these deliberations that are going on in the Senate, for example, as an example, and know really this is what should play out? Or know that actually this is what should happen when it comes to the disbursement of funds?
How many of us actually even want to be aware?
Even want to be aware. So then how do you hold somebody accountable for something that you yourself have no interest in whatsoever?
We'll just point fingers here and say, that's why the senators are behaving this way, because they're looking at the reality on the ground. If you go back home and say, all right, we decided to adopt this formula, people will look at you and point fingers. And they'll say, you're the reason why we are no longer receiving 1.9 billion shillings that we could have received. And not being honest with ourselves on what have we seen as the work being done with the extra 1.9 billion shillings that was received by our county last year. Coming to the top of the hour. Siti Muga, remind us today's proverb.
If it happens that you have some argument with someone who may be labeled as a fool, there's one thing you're assured of. You will lose that argument.
Completely.
Absolutely.
Because he's a fool or because it's an argument?
The issue here is not embedded in someone being a fool or in someone talking. It's on understanding the role of silence.
Okay. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock.
Things haven't changed too much if we're looking at the streets today. Thika Road is still a bit of a mess. It's going to take you a little bit of time if you're headed towards the CBD or then going towards Westlands. The service lanes, however, are up and open. You should be able to use that without much of a problem. Mombasa Road is where you might be stuck around this time for a little bit, but it'll open in a short while. We'll be out of traffic hour in about half hour or so. But for now, it isn't looking too terrible, guys. It's not done too badly. The incident with the pole on Gong Road has been removed, so that's fine, and traffic is moving as back to normal right now. So traffic has been good. Applause. In case of anything else before the hour is over, Spice of MKE on Twitter. Let us know what it is that you see. We'll try to keep traffic moving this morning.
Traffic.
Ningependa kuchukua fursa hii kukushukuru sana kwa kuendelea kusikiliza Spice FM. Naam, dakika 2 baada ya saa 3. What is it? Fursa. The meaning of the word fursa?
Yes.
Nafasi.
Fursa is what our friend in Nakuru, Zachary, would call kamweke.
Oh, gosh, that really helps me. Thanks.
Opportunity.
All right.
I'd like to take this opportunity, first of all, to really thank God for the opportunity to be with you here again. That's it. That's what Fursa is.
Got it.
Get it?
I shall use it. I get it.
All right. So let's take this opportunity to look at COVID-19 in the region. Somalia, how many deaths officially?
Well, if we look at the number of deaths in Somalia so far, how about we look at the number of cases in Somalia and then be able to get an idea? Okay, so how it all started in Somalia is that, okay, there was and then there wasn't. And then there was a problem with being able to reconcile those with the borders with Kenya. So currently, 93 deaths in Somalia officially, 3,212 cases in Somalia, out of a population of 15,922,067. They're looking at total cases of 202 per 1 million population and 6 deaths per 1 million population. All right. And having looked at those who might be in critical condition versus those who have recovered cases are 1,562. So they're looking at about 1,000 and such odd
Active cases.
Active cases.
Okay. Now, the BBC has premiered this very, very incisive story on the situation in Somalia. And it's basically called The Gravedigger's Truth, the hidden coronavirus deaths in Somalia. Just by hearing the word hidden and the Gravedigger's Truth, that tells you that this is telling us a story that's different from the official account that's on the ground. So officially, we have less than 100 deaths in Somalia, just about.
93, yeah.
In truth, the gravediggers are telling you that we are busy on a daily basis. People are basically flocking the cemeteries, going to bury their kin who have died on what appear to have been coronavirus cases. Very many people, even in hospitals. The doctors are talking about how they are dealing with these COVID-19 cases people are just coming with symptoms in these facilities. People are even avoiding to go to some hospitals because they've even labeled some hospitals that this is a corona hospital. You know, if you go there, you get corona, you die. As if you went to hospital
to look for corona.
To look for corona. Go, you get corona in this particular hospital, you die. We'll have a conversation with a journalist who did this story. He's an award-winning journalist, multiple award-winning international journalist. His name is Jamal Osman. Jamal works in sub-Saharan Africa. He's been working with various international media, including the BBC, the Al Jazeera, Channel 4, Guardian, to name just a few. He has scooped interviews with Somali pirates, the Al-Shabaab. He has exposed illegal mining in South Africa, highlighted abuse against albinos in Tanzania, teenage pregnancies in Sierra Leone, and many other stories across Africa. Jamal is the one who did this story. He's a journalist and a filmmaker, and he's the one who's actually done this story on Somalia. The Gravedigger's Truth, the hidden coronavirus deaths. He's joining us on the line this morning. Good morning, Jamal.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Jamal, thank you very much for speaking to us, and welcome to the Situation Room.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Speaking to us right now, you are in London. You're a globetrotter, so we've got to first of all establish where are you in this part of the world at present.
I'm currently in London. I'm not able to travel. I'm a regular traveler, so since the coronavirus crisis began, just before the coronavirus, I was back from Sierra Leone doing another story, so I'm now in London, stuck here.
Okay. Tell us about this story, The Gravedigger's Truth.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting story. I am Somali to start, and I'm always interested in what's happening in my country. And the BBC Africa I work with wanted to do this story. So what we have been hearing from the community and what we were hearing from the government didn't match. Because when you are from the community, you often hear so-and-so's father died, so-and-so's mother died, uncle, auntie, and I thought we are getting 3, 4, 5 a day from the government, so it's not true. So we assembled colleagues in Mogadishu who went on to visit local cemeteries, several of them. Especially we focused on one called Baraka, and the place was an empty land in January, and the gravediggers told us that was in April. We buried 2,000 plus people just in the last 4 months, and that's when we sort of became interested. So we look at the satellite images, and actually you can zoom in and count the graves, and you can see that in January it was empty land again. And then other cemeteries told us similar stories that we're burying 18, 20, 40 people every day, while in the past it was just few bodies they were burying. Then we went to the mosques, to local mosques, in total 19 main mosques in Mogadishu. And when someone dies, normally the bodies are taken to the mosque. They pray what's called janazah or funeral prayer. Everybody has to go to. So we asked those mosques, how many bodies are you praying every day on? And again, they told us in the past it was 5, 6, 7. Now you're talking about 40. Some said 60. One particular mosque said in the last sort of month we prayed of 90 bodies. So, and then again we went to private hospitals and they told us so many people are getting sick with COVID-19 symptoms, but You know, the interesting thing is they didn't want to go to the only designated hospital in Somalia, only designated COVID-19 hospital, because the hospital was labeled as you said, the hospital of death.
Yeah.
And that was quite the sad reality is, they didn't. You expect people to go and seek help in the hospital, but actually they were avoiding the hospital, and many people were dying at home. So that is the overall situation in Somalia, and there are reasons why this is happening. But people didn't want to go to hospital, didn't want to admit they have COVID-19 symptoms. They didn't want to even test themselves whether they had this disease or not. And life were going as normal. The government were putting out the right messages, social distancing, please stay at home. But as if nothing was happening, markets, mosques, public transport, everything was going as normal. And I think that is what has caused so many deaths in Somalia, in particular in Mogadishu.
Jamal, are you saying what you're saying now is what you've been able to find out from people? People then dying from these symptoms. So the numbers that we are seeing here, I mean, officially 93 deaths. So if you were to do a calculation off the top of your head, from whom you've spoken to, how much more are you looking at here?
We cannot for 100% be sure how many, because it's Somalia, it's a country that has gone through civil wars and systems don't work. The government does not function, so it's very difficult to put an accurate number. But from the evidence we gathered, I would put in several thousands of people just in Mogadishu, and we're not talking about our other parts of Somalia. We focused on Mogadishu. So if one grave, one cemetery, and the grave diggers and the admins, and actually they have a good system where they record how many people they bury every day, the names and everything. So if one just cemetery told us 2,000 plus, other cemeteries were telling us similar stories, you can imagine how many people have died with COVID-19 symptoms.
But I would imagine that there would be other causes of death and other factors that we need to take into consideration here when you're even reviewing this story. First of all, the health-seeking behavior of the people in Mogadishu itself. So let's say in January, how many people were going to hospital? And then in March, how many people were going to hospital for any ailments?
Yeah, I mean, the hospitals generally in malaria, as I said, diabetes, these are the common sort of illnesses in Somalia, I would say. And the private hospitals, as I said, and were telling us that the number has gone up. And actually, we were filming this for 2 months, visiting private hospitals, cemeteries, mosques, just going back to the same places just to see how the number is going up. And even within the time we were filming, our colleagues were recording how many people were coming into the private hospitals, the cemeteries, the mosques, and everywhere. So, I would say, and most of these people, though they would not admit it's a COVID-19, they have COVID-19, but they were complaining about COVID-19 symptoms, that lack of breathing, temperature. But again, they didn't want to take tests, so that complicates the situation. They didn't want to take tests because there is a stigma.
Do the private hospitals?
They don't want to be told.
Do the private hospitals have a capacity to conduct the tests?
No, they would normally send to this designated hospital and a test center that works with the hospital. But people don't want to go to these places. They don't want to be tested because they don't want to know that they have COVID-19. They are avoiding it completely. And again, that, as I said, that didn't help the community because they didn't want to go to this particular hospital where they would have been tested and told positive or negative. But as I said, the number of people who were complaining about COVID-19 symptoms were huge.
Yeah. You see, where I'm heading with this conversation is what we saw here in Kenya is when COVID-19 was reported, the first cases were reported, in the initial weeks, we saw a drop in other hospital visits across the country. So you'd find that in many public hospitals and even private hospitals, people stopped going to hospital because they were the same thing. They were thinking that now you don't want to fill up the hospital. You don't want to inundate the doctors. Doctors are just dealing with COVID-19, so you avoid going to hospital. So we had a drop in the number of people who were going to hospital. Now that number has started coming back up again. But what you're saying is that what you were seeing in Somalia was the exact opposite of that, or sort of unrelated opposite, where people stopped going to the public facility and they were seeking healthcare in the private facilities.
Yeah, yes, that's what was happening because we don't have that many public hospitals in Somalia. This was probably the only one that was dealing with COVID-19. But the interesting thing with the private hospitals themselves, where some of them, not all of them, were kicking out of patients with COVID-19 symptoms because they did not want other sort of patients with other illnesses to avoid coming to the hospital. So even some private hospitals were doing that, and when they see someone who have difficulties in breathing and high temperature, they would tell them, go to Martini Hospital, we cannot help you here. So the Martini Hospital is the designated hospital for COVID-19. So we also found some hospitals were telling patients, please go away, please go away. So yeah, people were flocking into private hospitals because that's what people know in Somalia and in Mogadishu. It's mostly private, and they are not used to public services. As I said, we haven't had a functioning authority in Somalia for many years. So people think nobody would treat me for free. So there must be something else. They must be after something else. And again, that mistrust of a system and a government didn't help. But they know the private hospitals where you go and pay money and you're treated and you go home if you're okay. So all that, as I said, complicated the situation. Also religion, I think. We went to, as I said, many mosques. They were full, they were praying, and people were saying, it's fine, God will take me away whenever he wants. That's fine. And that fatalism also played a big part, I would say, in people not sort of following the rules of social distancing and staying at home and avoiding crowded places.
How many people, if you were to speak anecdotally, would actually be able to afford hospitalization or services of a private hospital in Mogadishu?
Yeah, again, sadly, it's those who have money who can go to private hospitals. If you don't have money to pay, then you die at home. And as we have documented, yes, many people were dying at home. Those who couldn't afford, especially in the IDPs, internally displaced persons who couldn't afford to go to. But those who were able to afford at least the sort of $10 registration or $20 were able to go in and get something, or at least were 10 back and told to go home or go to the other hospital. So it's whether you can afford to pay that sort of $10 or $20 registrations or not.
What is the population of Mogadishu, roughly?
Yeah, roughly they say it's about 2 to 3 million. Again, there is no accurate figure. We haven't done any census for years and years. So but they usually say 2 to 3 million. Yeah.
And how many private hospitals do we have in Mogadishu?
There are so many private, so-called private hospitals. Even some pharmacies act as private hospitals. But I would say there are 5 main private hospitals that people usually go to, who are not very big, but big enough. But as I said, even pharmacies, local pharmacies, act as they have a room at the back where they call it private hospital. Yeah. So it's not regulated. So anybody can say I'm a doctor. Anybody can set up somewhere. They say I know something about your body and health. So yes, but there are 5 main private hospitals that people usually go with complications.
So in a theoretical setting where, say, every citizen of Mogadishu was able to afford health care, those who suspect that they may have been infected by the COVID virus, do you think they would all be able to receive care?
I think the hospital that was designated for COVID-19, as I said, remember, they only had 20 ICU beds. And if everybody who had with symptoms had gone to the hospital, the hospital would have been overwhelmed. But again, ironically, during the 2 months we were filming, that 20 beds, the maximum number we counted in any particular day was 7 patients in the ICU unit. And outside there were so many people, and in the private hospital, so many people who were complaining about COVID-19 symptoms. So I don't think they would have dealt if everybody who was seriously ill had gone to the hospital, and the hospitals would have been overwhelmed. But as I said, people were not seeking that help, and some private hospitals were turning away and telling people go to Martini Hospital, that designated hospital. But so many of them were dying at home. And actually, we visited again people who didn't want to be filmed dying, but actually my colleagues witnessed people at home with these symptoms and dying, and spoke with their relatives. Why don't you want to take to the hospital? And people were saying, we better die at home than in that hospital, because that hospital is known as the hospital of death. And even the doctors we interviewed were saying that, and it's in the film that this hospital is known. People don't want to come to this hospital.
Yeah.
So it's always difficult to put an accurate figure because it's Somalia, as I said. But we also witnessed people dying at home actually with COVID-19 symptoms, and relatives didn't want to take them to the hospital. And as I said, private hospitals were not able to deal with these cases, and were mostly turning them away and saying, go to the hospital or go home.
Jamal, I mean, you talk about, if one gravesite, for example, 2,000 bodies being buried and things like this, it's a big number. By the time you're burying 2,000 bodies over time, somebody's bound to have taken notice. So I want to ask you then, I know that in terms of government structure, it's one thing, to say the least, but don't you think they would have realized these large numbers of people that are being buried across the country?
People realize it, and as I said, if you talk to people on the ground in Mogadishu, for example, and as I said, we focused on Mogadishu, but similar stories were happening across the country, in big cities especially. Actually, when you talk to people in the city, they would tell you, yes, people are dying in huge numbers. That is how we started investigating this, why the government is telling this number, and people are talking about, I have relatives, I have friends, and I have been talking to them, and people, yes, they know. They would say, yes, people are dying, but what they would sort of question is, especially those who are not well educated, is they would say, oh, people always die. People are dying of malaria and other stuff. Yeah. We are not sure about this COVID-19. So somewhere in denial of the COVID-19, others were saying people are dying, we think, of COVID-19. So people are not necessarily disputing, especially those who are educated and work in the government and in the NGO sectors, were saying huge number of people are dying. So, and as I said, even local officials, even the Mogadishu mayor, once made a statement saying in the past 10 days, I think it was at the end of April, we buried 500 people in one place. That's what he said. Yeah. So he was giving an interview, and he said the official number from the government and what we are hearing from the community, it's not.
Maybe different. But are we able to establish whether all these people who have died in the last 4 months in Mogadishu have died of COVID? Like when you're asking the people themselves who say we've lost a relative, do the people who've died fit the other criteria or other profiles that fit with the COVID? For example, do they have their pre-existing conditions? Do they know whether this person was diabetic or hypertensive or such other ailments?
Yes, we were asking these questions, and obviously there are other people who were dying for other. The relatives were telling us they had other issues, but the people who were dying with these symptoms, as I said, were quite big, and that's the question we were asking: how this person is feeling, what's happening, what other sort of health complications they have. And I said that diabetes is a big issue in Somalia, and most of the people who were dying are, I would say, in that over 55 or over 50, which in Somalia it's probably in Western context it's about 70. It's like 70-year-old because of the lifestyle and where they are and the war and all of that. So yeah, people, that's what we have been hearing. The person has died because they couldn't breathe. The person died because they had a high temperature, and these are the sort of COVID-19 symptoms. But yeah, there are a few others who we were told died for other reasons, whether the relatives didn't want to admit or not, that we don't know. But as I said, from what we have gathered, what the grave diggers, the cemeteries, the mosques, the sort of even the Mogadishu mayor, the private hospitals hospitals, and even the doctors we were interviewing in the designated hospital, and the general community were telling us is so many people are dying with lack of breathing and high temperature, and that tells you.
But do they fit the other telltale signs? For instance, if somebody has died in this home and people are saying that this person had COVID-19 symptoms, then you'd expect that the way we have seen COVID-19, there's a high probability of other people in that household being infected. Did you see that? Did you see, for example, this home, one person has died or 4 people have died and they had the same symptoms, or one person died but the rest of the people are exhibiting the symptoms? There's somebody else, at least, who came into contact with a dead person who's exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms.
We have seen that, and I think mostly old people are the sort of in the most vulnerable group, or those who have other health issues. And there's one particular neighborhood we wanted to film where we were told a number of old men who used to hang around in a particular cafe died. And then there was another mosque that actually we wanted to focus on, in which the imam told us, I think more than a dozen people who used to pray on the sort of first row, old men usually, all of them are gone. We buried all of them. So when you look at in those particular areas and you zoom in, you realize people who were just together, whether it's hanging out in one coffee shop or in one particular mosque, sort of probably have sort of passed the virus around. But I think what also has sort of saved Somalia is it's a young generation. I would say more than 70% are very young, and even the young people, and as the doctor said, 90% of the doctors who were working in that particular area tested positive, and a lot of other young people I was talking to, even some from London, were telling me they have tested positive. So, but they were okay because they were young.
Yeah, but the question I'm asking, Jamal, is when you go to this neighborhood and you're told that in this particular street, for example, the elderly people have died, do you see other people in that neighborhood exhibiting the symptoms? Maybe they're not as elderly, they don't have, they may not be diabetic, but you can see there are people who are coughing, and you can tell there is some prevalence or some
community transmission.
Community transmission. There are people who are symptomatic.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. We were looking around and trying to even focus a particular area, zoom in and say this might be the place. As I said, there's one particular neighborhood that we were told all these old men who used to hang around died. And even the relatives were saying they are feeling, they're sort of having symptoms. But again, they didn't go to the hospital and to be tested. They were feeling okay, they said. They can walk around and do. So yes, definitely that has been happening. And as I said, in one particular mosque, they will tell you the old people died, but the young people are coughing and they have issues, but they are still around. So from that, when you look at in these particular areas or mosques or neighborhood or a particular coffee shop, people will tell you old people who used to come here died, but the young people are, might be coughing, they have flu, but they are still going on about their daily life. So yeah, you can definitely say in particular areas people were affected more than others.
Does the government that oversees the management of Mogadishu have any plan that is known of to try and avert this clear crisis that Mogadishu has with COVID-19?
I mean, I think I'm sure people know about Somalia, but I think because of the war we had for 30 years, as I said, religion and the government exists on paper, but in reality, the government does not function as an authority. That is the reality in Somalia. It's not like Kenya, where the authorities can say, for instance, Nairobi is in lockdown, and the government has the capacity to enforce the rule of law. But in Somalia, the government was saying the right things, like curfews, this, that, but the government does not have the power or the capacity.
So who has the power?
I mean, we are coming back and as a nation, I think, but Somalia has been a lawless place, sadly. I'm not proud to say that, but for many years. But there are police around, there are traffic, but I don't think the government has the capacity to enforce the rule of law. And And as I said, they were telling people, even the police commander was telling people, curfew, stay at home. And then on that particular day, we went around asking people, the government is saying, stay at home, why are you not staying? And people were saying, we don't really care. Some were saying we need to work, others were saying we need to pray to the mosque, others were saying, there's nothing they can do. Let them come and tell me to go home. So, yes, the government exists on paper, but in reality, the government does not have.
But who are the influential voices? Because nature abhors a vacuum. I mean, if the government is still trying to get its act together, there must be some people who are listened to. Who are these people?
I think I would say community leaders, religious leaders, those people are listened to. And I think that's one of the mistakes the government made, was to just follow the sort of the WHO guidelines. And again, Somalia relies on international aid, I would say, mostly. So if they need to do something, they have to seek help from the international community. And there are lots of NGOs that are trying to do something. So, yes, the government were sort of releasing messages through voicemail or telephones and, here and there. But I think that one of the big mistakes they've made was not to convince the religious community and the elders to talk to the community and tell them, look, this is serious, you must stay at home. So they did not consider the local context, and the most influential people, as I said, are the religious groups. And the religious groups were not convinced, again, because they didn't want to close down the mosques. They didn't want to say, okay, everybody should go home. The mosques were open as normal, the markets and everywhere. So, yes, the religious groups, probably the business community would have also influenced the clan elders. Somalia is a clan-based society. But when we spoke with them, people said, yeah, we're hearing something on the radio, but actually we don't don't trust the government. Huh?
Jamal, let's take a quick break. Jamal Osman is a multi-award-winning international journalist and a filmmaker. He's a producer of a story that's now been published and broadcast on BBC called The Gravedigger's Truth, The Hidden Coronavirus Deaths, highlighting the situation in Somalia in the fight against COVID-19, what's happening on the ground. He says that their team visited several mosques, several cemeteries and hospitals, and recorded at least about 400 deaths within just 2,000 deaths, in just about 4 months. And this is many people. Mosques saying that now they are dealing with about 40 deaths a day, or even cemeteries saying that we are dealing with about 80 deaths per day. That is a high number. What's the situation in the Somali capital, Mogadishu, and other parts of town of Somalia? That's the conversation we're having. Let's take a quick break at 9:30. This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's
All right, let's take a last look at what's going on in the skies for today, Wednesday. In Nairobi, it's warming up just a bit and the cloud cover is lifting. 18 degrees for most parts of today, most parts of Nairobi, highs of 22 and lows of 12. Taking a look then into Nyeri, where it's mostly cloudy this morning at 16 degrees. We'll have some showers later with highs of 21 and lows of 13. It's mostly cloudy in Nakuru at 16 degrees. Rain expected later with highs of 21 and lows of 12. In Eldoret, we're going to experience some rain later with highs of 18 and lows of 11. Kisumu is mostly cloudy at 21 degrees, highs of 26 and lows of 18. Likely to be a wet afternoon there. Take a look into Kakamega, where 23 degrees will be the high and lows of 14 with thunderstorms forecasted for later. Mombasa, the rain has stopped for now. It's mostly sunny now, highs of 29 and lows of 23. And it's still coming down in Malindi at 26 degrees. We'll take a break and then come back with rains later with highs of 28 and lows of 24. All right, let's step out into Kampala, where 21 degrees is partly cloudy. We'll see highs of 24 and lows of 18. And in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, 26 degrees, warming up nicely to highs of 31 and lows of 23. Joburg, 7 degrees, warming up as well. We'll have sunny conditions today, but it'll be a crisp coolness throughout the city, highs of 18 and lows of 4. In Lagos, it's partly cloudy, but there's a heavy fog that has settled over the city. 24 degrees currently, highs of 29, and the fog will open up into rains with lows of 23. Let's take a look into London at 12 degrees, sunny conditions with highs of 23 and lows of 12. And in Paris today, it's sunny at 15, highs of 26 and lows of 15. Getting round into Wednesday morning in New York, clear skies at 27 degrees with highs of 32 and lows of 24. Road traffic now is moving very smoothly. You shouldn't have a problem getting in and out of the CBD coming from that direction. Mombasa Road also is developing nicely. You'll be able to get past General Motors and then on towards Bellevue. When you get there, though, there'll be a slight hold up because of the construction that's going on and taking down that bridge. But you will be fine thereafter. Traffic has officially come to an almost end there. All right. They're working on the traffic lights around Adams Roundabout to the Postal Cross Junction. It's going to take a while to sort that out, so traffic is going to be hampered just a little bit. But apart from that, across the city and indeed across the country, we're officially out.
Spice FM, Nakuru. Traffic.
24 minutes to 10 o'clock. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. This conversation continues with Jamal Osman. He is a Somali national, multi-award winning international journalist and filmmaker. He's worked with international organizations like the BBC, Al Jazeera, Channel 4 and others. And he has done a story, produced a story that is now on the BBC. It's called The Gravedigger's Truth, The Hidden Coronavirus Deaths in Somalia, highlighting the coronavirus situation in Somalia and what's happening on the ground. Officially, the number of dead in Somalia stands at 93 as of this morning, right? That's the official figure. Already Jamal has told us that there's one designated public hospital in Somalia that's designated as the one that is dealing with COVID-19. This is called Martini, the Martine. And the people around Mogadishu already are avoiding going to that hospital because they've already christened it the hospital of death. So people start going either to private facilities or just taking care of themselves at home. And what Jamal is also describing as, you know, that fatalistic attitude of the people. They're like, all right, yeah, people are dying. We're all going to die anyway. So whatever is happening now is not different from what has been happening before. However, there is something that is happening. There's some grave sites that were empty in January. And by April, they had already covered like 2,000 graves. Already. 2,000 people buried in these places. Already mosques would talk about bodies being brought in for the final rites, at least 40 per day. grave sites and grave diggers saying that they're dealing with at least even 80, up to 80 people per day. Their team, Jamal and his team, going around neighborhoods, and the neighborhood people telling them, yeah. There was a certain elderly person here and there, and they've all died in the last couple of weeks. So there's something that's happening on the ground. Many of them say that they had the COVID-19 symptoms, but with limited capacity to test, because the testing is only happening in the public facility, it's not very clear to tell that this was COVID-19 related or not. So this brings in the whole conversation here of the government's capacity, the people's attitude, and the situation on the ground. Do you think, CT, as we bring in Jamal again into the conversation, do you think the people who have died in that period of time, there's a spike in the number of deaths because of COVID-19? Or would you say that the health-seeking behavior having changed because people are not going to the hospital anymore is also exacerbating that?
It's that and then some. You see, you have a health system that isn't regulated.
Yeah.
Then you have the health-seeking behavior, as you correctly put it. Mm-hmm. And then there are the social factors that help determine this health-seeking behavior and the understanding and the perception that people have of death. And then they are what you call the leading opinion leaders, opinion voices within the community. And in this case, it is not the government. So already, it's like you have a 3-tier, not even 2, 3-tier set of government. There is what they call the national government. You have the religious leaders, then you have the community leaders. Now, if these people aren't in tandem in fighting COVID, most assuredly, whatever norms they have followed from antiquity are the norms they will follow. And many of these norms may not be COVID reduction friendly. So it's a situation where my worry has been, have they understood that the likelihood of an entire community being decimated is actually a reliable discussion that one should have? Because in the absence of anything that is certain, more people than need die will die.
Jamal, do they see this as a threat?
Some people, yeah. Some people see it as a threat. Some people, very few, I would say. As I said, the sort of the educated ones who follow the global sort of health warnings, yes, take it seriously. And some have been sort of trying. Some of at least friends and people I know were isolating themselves and avoiding public gatherings. But I would say the general population has been just very laid back about the whole thing. They, as I said, again, the sad reality is because we have gone through a
context,
really
yes,
civil war and conflict. Context very important in this case, I think. For them, that is like, okay, if people die, they have always died, you know. And the generation that are now in Mogadishu, anyone who is, I say, 40 or under, have some sort of gone through the civil war and have experienced death and destruction. So it's like another way of dying it for them. It's not a big deal.
That's nothing new.
That's the attitude, I think. Nothing new, and that attitude. And sometimes they would say, oh, why are you making a big deal out of it? People die all the time. And you say, but that's not any... Actually, that is again, one of the interesting things we captured on camera, people saying, why you guys are making a big deal? People are dying. They have always died. And you say, but actually, do you know why they are dying it? And would you ask yourself, was this preventable? And it's like, no, people have always died here. Don't worry about it. So the attitude does not help. And that is when, as a Somali, I realized the importance of government, actually, the importance of a government that can serve the public in times of crisis, but also enforce the law. A government that can tell people, this is what we think for the good of the population, for the good of the nation. This is what you have to do. These are the rules, and we will implement.
It's interesting that you say that, Jamal. It's interesting that you say that, because then here you are dealing with a population of people who are used to death, like you said it, because of the fact that there was an internal conflict, right? So for them, it's not a different reality for what they may have seen before. But however, the importance of government to make you understand and realize this is not something then that is just unique to Somalia, but it is something that the rest of the globe is going through. So important important for government to then come in and step in then with the relevant messages that this is not just a wartime situation. This is something that is affecting the rest of the globe, and that there are certain things then that you must do. Do you think then that there would be able to be that mind shift for people to get away from this feeling, or is it as the horse already bolted, as it were, to get away from this feeling that, all right, people are going to die anyway, as opposed to this is a global pandemic, there's something that we can do within the country to actually stop this death, which has been so normalized?
No, sadly, the attitude, and again, I am following it, not only as a journalist, but as a Somali, the attitude isn't changing. And I think it will take time if anything, any changes happen. And as I said, the government awareness and, the information and talking, that what you needed to do in cases of Somalia is just not copycat WHO guidelines, which Somalis don't even understand what that means, and just take it. It's good, but you don't blindly follow other stuff. But you needed to talk to the clan elders who are quite powerful, business community, convince them to shut down shops, the mosques, tell the religious community, please shut down the mosques. And then people would have nowhere to go. And that's what you could have probably done to prevent something. But again, or also at least put the police out there to say people stay at home, like you do in Kenya and other places. But the government, when able to do that, and in terms of convincing these influential leaders, the religious community, the clan elders, and what have you, and they don't have the forces or the capacity to put thousands or hundreds of policemen out there to tell people don't come out of your house. So when you consider Somalia and the situation on the ground, there are things the government cannot do, and you have a society that are sort of fatalism and experience war and believe in or misunderstood sort of Islam or interpreted and think, okay, if I die, I die. It's not a big deal. So that doesn't help when you have the society that has that attitude, a government that cannot do anything about it, can only put out statements, but actually cannot follow up with that statement and say, this is what we think, you must follow the rules. So, yeah, that doesn't help. And that attitude isn't changing because people are not getting the right information, as it were. They are getting something, but it will take some time, I think, for people to... And interestingly, when you talk to those who lost a family member, it's quite interesting how they change over time, because as I said, we've been following it. Some particular people, and before they would tell you, oh, no, it's fine, this person is fine. If they die for something else, might be. But then you ask them when they lose a family member, and they take it very seriously. So some, yes, are taking seriously, but
it stings at home.
The population overall are not taking it seriously.
And I think it's very important, Jamal, that your story is also able to tell, because your story is now going to the international community, to paint that picture and give that context of what's happening in Somalia, and the context of a people who have grown up, an entire generation who have grown up in conflict and war and a lack of government. So they do not know, for example, a healthcare system that works. Therefore, they have never really felt that if I felt sick, I could go to hospital and I would depend on the hospital to get treatment. Already, that's number one. They have absolutely no expectation, no trust of a healthcare system, no expectation, no trust of a government. The religious leaders that we're talking about, the community leaders, also play their own level of politics, and all this impacts the fight against COVID-19. Is that coming out in your story? I'm fearing that an international community would look at it and just say, all right, this is another failed state. Africa, this is, what else do you expect? You need to give the context to the people, because we really cannot, from where I'm sitting, I'm finding it very hard to judge those people, because this is how you live.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, and you cannot judge them, because I've said that for them that is normal. Yeah. That is normal. That's what they have known. That's what they experience. And as I said, if I am in London and I am sick, I know my local hospital, and I know they won't charge me anything, and that's where I would go immediately. But in Somalia, nothing is free. If the government tells you, come, we treat you for free, people think the government is going to do something to them, or they might sort of, that theories they have is they might remove their kidneys and sell it, or there are all sorts of crazy ideas they have about it. So people avoid, but they know the private hospitals, because they have been dealing with private hospitals over the years. They know if you're sick, you pay money, you get treated. An entire generation grew up in that environment. So it will take a long time to change, I think, that attitude and all of that. But they're not used to public services, as I said, in the piece. People are not used to public services. They don't know a government provides public services, a lot of them. So they think that the government is after something. Some of them were telling us, oh, the government is using this to make money from us, and telling the international community, give us more money. So people have all sorts of conspiracy theories, and that does not help. And it's here where you need a government that is functioning, that can put the right information out there and put fake news out, sort of delete fake news stuff, and approach the right people to talk to the community. And that has not been happening in Somalia. And I think that's one major factor that so many people are dying and have died of sort of with COVID-19 symptoms, but nobody can count them. Nobody knows how many of them. Yes, as I said, people will tell you, grave diggers will tell you, mosques will tell you, neighborhoods will tell you, but nobody can put an actual figure.
Would you say that any international help that Somalia is receiving is actually having an impact?
I think that's, I would say some, but not much. And the international community has, it's probably a separate story, I think, but has been saying we are giving Somalia millions and billions and all of that, but it's not reaching the targeted people. That's what I would say. The money is ending up somewhere else, probably with the pockets of corrupt individuals and what have you. But yes, the international community would say we are helping Somalis, but is that reaching the targeted people? That's my question. And I have many stories about that, aid business, and whether that's reaching the targeted communities and people on the ground. And sadly, it gets there. Very little gets there, I would say. The money ends up somewhere else. So yes, the international community, if you ask them, would probably tell you we spend billions on Somalia, but that billions might be tiny percent of it reaches actual Somalia on the ground, and it helps people. So that's what I would say. And the biggest industry in Somalia, I think, is the NGOs.
Yeah.
The international NGOs are the biggest industry in terms of, providing so-called public services and
unemployment as well.
Unemployment is huge. But I think, as I said, what saves Somalia now it's the young generation, and people will tell you, yes, I'm coughing, I have high temperature, and they're still going on about their daily life. So that is, I would say, one positive thing out of doing this story. The young generation are going up. This herd immunity, I think, unintentionally it's happening in Somalia, I think. It's happening in Somalia unintentionally, yeah.
How influential is the Somali diaspora?
The Somali diaspora are quite influential, but when you, and if you look at the government, are run by the Somali diaspora. From here, they usually get the president, the prime minister, the ministers. They're mostly
in
people
London.
from the diaspora. People from London, America, and everywhere.
Right.
They go to Somalia and join the political class and run the country. But I think there is a big gap between the diaspora and the local people. The diaspora are mostly sort of social media, media savvies, but the local people, most of them don't have access to even internet and Twitter and social media and what have you. So there is a big gap. Even when I was looking at the government and where it was targeting, if you look at the messages were mostly on Twitter, Facebook in English. And how many Somalis speak in English in Somalia? Those of us in the diaspora.
This is the Somali government's messaging.
But I am in London. I don't need them. They're not. I'm not in Somalia. So they were mostly targeting on sort of international community and the Somali diaspora. So even the messaging, you would say, it's totally wrong.
Yeah.
What they needed to do was get that message in the local radios where people listen radios. And we even interviewed some radios which did not make our final piece, but we went around local radios asking them whether they are broadcasting or talking about COVID-19. And yes, they were sort of mentioning here and there, but considering what was happening on the ground, we said it should have been a big news, and they could have played a big part in that. So I would say there was a big gap, because the guys who run the government are diaspora, in touch with people in America and London and somewhere else.
But
So
not
the
in
international
Mogadishu and other parts. Let's take another break.
No, people in Somalia listen radio. Yeah.
We want to take another break. Jamal Osman is a multi-award winning international journalist and filmmaker from Somalia. He's currently in London. He's done a story, very beautiful story, called The Gravedigger's Truth, Hidden Coronavirus Deaths, highlighting what's happening in Somalia in the fight against COVID-19. At 7 minutes to 10 o'clock, let's take a quick break and then come and conclude that conversation with Jamal. 5 minutes to 10 o'clock as we conclude the conversation with Jamal Osman, journalist from Somalia, who's done this wonderful piece, The Gravedigger's Truth, Hidden Coronavirus Deaths, airing on BBC and across all BBC platforms. The issue of, what the kind of deaths that we're seeing in Somalia, in Mogadishu, just alone in Mogadishu, from what Jamal is saying. Even looking at the clip itself, you see, when people are going to bury their dead, they are not really bothered about that whole issue of social distancing.
That's true.
Corona is just, it's just
something else that's going to kill us.
Yeah.
Not only that,
Take a number.
It's not worrisome. It's not something that bothers them.
No,
not really.
It's
Compared to whatever else they've experienced, their lived experience, Corona, not really a big thing. So, how do you get a community that has had the issues that a community in Mogadishu specifically has had? How do you get them to internalize and understand that COVID actually is a problem? And how is it going to compare with everything else that they have to deal with on a daily basis?
The question that might be asked is, COVID really a problem in Mogadishu?
It's a problem for those who say it is.
Jamal, what did you say to that?
Sorry, I missed your question. Sorry.
We're just looking at it and saying, okay, with all the number of problems that people have, you wake up in the morning, you don't have access to healthcare, you don't have a functioning government, you have any risk of dying or being maimed in some sort of violence. Is COVID really an issue?
I mean, it should be an issue, but it's not an issue. And I think what also made what was quite interesting is it's sort of, as we said in our piece, it's an invisible killer. It's not a bomb or an AK-47 or something they used to. And I think that also does not help. It's not something they're used to. It's not something they have known. They know that, and they know people have always been buried. People have always died, but this is an invisible killer, and it's very difficult to sort of explain to them and say, this is how it works. This is a disease. You can spread it around. Someone will get it. That if that person is old or has health issues, they would die. This is how it works. So I think it's about messaging. It's about information. It's about awareness. About campaign. And the big question in Somalia is who is going to do that. And as we don't have a functioning government, then it's not. Sadly, it's not going to happen. And I think
Still up in the air.
COVID-19 will kill more people. Yeah.
Jamal, thank you very much for speaking to us. Jamal Osman is a multi-award-winning international journalist and filmmaker. How can we people get to see this story?
Yeah, you can see on BBC Africa YouTube the whole documentary. It's almost 30 minutes long. BBC News Africa on YouTube. If you check, it's on BBC website, Africa website.
Right.
So it's there. But the main doc is on BBC News Africa YouTube.
Okay. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Jamal, and wish you a very good day in London. Before you go, just listen to today's proverb from C.T. Muga. See if you can internalize this.
If you and a fool have an argument, he wins.
You get that, Jamal?
Sorry, I missed again. Sorry. If
You and a fool have an argument, he wins.
I did not get that.
The context
Yes,
of it.
it's an
Right.
African proverb.
Third time's a charm.
Yes, and the proverb or the saying goes thus: if you and a fool have an argument, then this fool wins the argument.
If you and fool have an argument, the fool would win an argument. Okay, yeah, I understand.
It's extolling the virtues of silence
Okay, I understand.
and the virtues of understanding that not all battles have to be won.
Yeah, understood.
Sometimes losing is winning.
Yes. Yeah.
Jamal, have a good day, and thank you very much for speaking to us.
Same to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Santasana, and thank you very much for tuning into the Situation Room today. Join us again tomorrow, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Between now and 3 o'clock, you have uninterrupted music, sugar and spice, and everything nice. And then Monique will be here to drive you home on Spice Drive from 3 to 7. Good morning. It's now 10 o'clock. Have a good day.